Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Straight Shootin' series. The date is December 4th, 2005, and we are joined by the one and only Lance Storm. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We're going to take a look at your whole career with a big emphasis on the WCW, ECW, WWE stuff, but let's start at the beginning. What are your memories of training with the Hearts?
I remember my first day getting to camp. It's one of those things, if you've ever been to a wrestling camp, is there's a lot of dreamers involved that really don't have a whole lot of chance, and it's like the first dozen guys I met were either 150 pounds or 400 pounds and non-athletic, and I actually seriously considered like packing up and going back home and finding a different school until Chris Jericho walked in, and I'm like, oh my god, thank somebody else who looks like they actually know what they're doing. So if it wasn't for Jericho, I probably would have packed up and looked into a different school. And then after that, all I remember is the hours and hours of stretching that they would put us through agony, being stretched and tied up and everything else. But I think, in the end, it ended up being, a far better school than I thought it was going to be when I met the first dozen guys. But it was a lot of fun and a good experience. And starting in Calgary is always a good place to go.
Who did the most of the training there?
Keith Hart was the one running it at the time. He was the only actual Hart that was involved. Although we were promised several times that both Brett and Owen would be by, but realistically they were doing 300 dates a year on the road, and the last thing they wanted to do was spend time with us. So Keith was the Hart that was running it, and they had a guy by the name of Brad Young, who was one that was actually in the ring taking the bumps with us and demonstrating and so forth, because Keith wasn't in there taking backdrops to show us how it was done. So Brad Young did the most of the actual physical end of it, and it was Keith's instruction and so forth. But.
Okay. How about your memories of your first match against Chris Jericho? Which was the first match of your career?
It was October 2nd, I believe, 1990, in Ponoka, Alberta. And Ponoka is most known for a mental institution, which was very appropriate considering the caliber of our show. Jericho and I were the second or third match on the show, and with the exception of one other match on the show, was probably the best match of the night, which again shows how bad the show was, not how good we were at the time. But it was a lot of fun. We did a 15-minute draw, I think, in front of maybe 100 people, and I remember it's like, just the nerves going crazy. It's, oh my god, we're actually, having a match in front of people. And we got paid, I think, $30 Canadian. So it was a huge payday. Thankfully, Jericho and I got paid a lot more for our last match together.
Then you did a lot of traveling around the world. You did Germany, and you had FMW and war in Japan. How did you end up getting all the international exposure?
Most of it was through Jericho. Actually, most of my bookings the first, 3 or 4 years were Jericho. All the indies that I got from there, he had got the in first. And since we were tagging, basically said, we'll book my partner too. FMW was that way. There was a guy named Fred Jung in Calgary who had booked Rick Titan, the guy that did the fake Razor Ramon gimmick. He had booked him with FMW, and he was looking for more talent because he was a foreign agent, or whatever you want to call it. So he contacted Jericho to go with FMW, and Jericho said, I'm in a tag team, you got to book us both. So we got the gig with FMW that way. And then I did a tour of Lebanon, actually by myself without Chris. I had split ways with Fred at that point in time because I just thought he was the biggest sack of crap in the world. Hope he sees this. So I had separated with him, and just through Gamma Singh, one of the Stampede regulars who got the deal of booking overseas through Chris Adams, I did that trip, and then I got the Otto Vaughn's gig in Europe through my barber. Yeah, barbers get you booked a lot. I had the Tokyo Joe Daigo, who was a New Japan talent agent, whatever you call him, in Calgary, who was tight with Otto and booked Japanese guys for Otto as well. Had the same barber as me. It was one of those things where a lot of guys in Calgary promised me that, I'll get you booked with Joe, I'll get you booked with Joe. And I was getting my hair cut the one time, and barber asked me what I did for a living, and I told him. He said, Joe Daigo. I'm like, well, I know who he is. He said, he gets his hair cut here. I said, well, if I left you pictures and tapes, would you show it to him? Yeah, no problem. So the next time I was in, I brought a couple 8x10s and a videotape of my work. And 2 weeks later, I got a call from Joe. You want to go booked in Europe? I booked you 6 months. And, 4 weeks later, I was in Europe working for Otto for 6 months. And then after that, where did I go after that? 94, 95. I got Smoky Mountain was after that, because I actually got booked with Cornette while I was in Europe. Through actually, Justin was my hookup with that one. I had
Justin Incredible?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had sent pictures and tapes to every promoter I could possibly think of when I was looking for work, and Cornette was one of them. I'd done up a tape and had my address and my number on it and sent it in.
And I guess I found out afterwards that Jimmy said he would get like 1,000 tapes a week.
He used to have a whole stack of them sitting on his VCR at home. And whenever he had a spare minute, he'd put them in. He said he had kids wrestling on couches and in their backyard. And he finally put mine in and popped huge for him. Oh my God, this guy actually, he's in a wrestling ring having matches. So he called the number, and I guess I had moved. So he's like, oh crap, I can't get a hold of this guy. And Justin was doing jobs with New York as PJ Walker at the time. And I trained Justin, when Justin went through the heart thing, I was doing the Brad Young job of taking all the bumps and demonstrating. So I had trained Justin there, and he had a Canadian Rocky Mountain jacket from the promotion that was running in Calgary at the time. And I guess on my tape I had footage of me wrestling in Canadian Rocky Mountain Wrestling. Cornette saw the jacket and said, hey, do you know this Lance Storm kid? And Peach was like, yeah, he trained me up in Calgary. He said, well, if you can get a hold of him, I'd love to hire him for Smokey, get him my number. So PJ got a hold of my wife, who got a hold of me and said, Jim Cornette wants to talk to you when you get home from Europe. He's got a spot for you. So I got the Smokey deal that way.
Who was like most helpful in helping you learn in your early days, especially like maybe in Japan?
The guy I learned the most from is Champagne Jerry Morrow, who was a Stampede regular. To this day, is still one of the more talented guys I've been in the ring with. He was big with Japan way back when, and big in Stampede. He was the first guy that really taught me ring psychology, and I was lucky enough to work a lot of shows with him in Calgary. And there's a lot of vets that, oh, here's this kid, I'm going to do as little as possible, or I'll eat him up and get out of it. But Jerry loves working hard. Like, he's like Rob Van Dam, working hard all the time, and he's like, even now, he's probably in his 50s and still works harder than most guys you see. And he was like, oh great, I've got guys that I can actually have good matches with, instead of, oh, here's a kid I can eat up and get an easy payday with. So he bumped his ass off for us and worked hard and really showed me the light as far as ring psychology went. Up until that point, I was out there doing spots like a moron, not knowing what the hell I was doing. And Jerry has a really strong accent, so he's hard to understand because English is his third language. He's from Martinique or something. His French is his first language. He's worked in Japan so long he speaks Japanese, and English is his third, so he's really hard to understand. So he used to lay things out in the back a fair bit when I first started working with him. And I really started understanding how a match can be broken down and put together and really make sense. So I really started realizing, what I was doing before was just a complete moron doing spots for no reason, and this sort of is the way things are supposed to be. And I really learned that from him and worked with him a ton.
Yeah.
I probably learned more from Jerry than anybody else I've ever worked with. Okay. I got lucky working with him so much. And I think I did a commentary once on my website about him. I think a lot of the great workers that came out of Calgary who get, as much as the Heart Dungeon gets credit for training and everything else, it's like nobody comes out of camp a great worker. And, we taught all the basics and fundamentals there, but it's like really learning how to work. I think a lot of the guys that came out of Calgary that were good workers learned it from Jerry.
Yeah.
So I know Benoit worked with Jerry a ton. I think Benoit's probably Jerry's favorite. Because I go, oh, it's almost just like Benoit. Because he could do, you could do whatever you want. And I was lucky enough that I was athletic enough that basically anything he wanted me to do, I could do. Which I think is what he got with Benoit too, and just the eagerness to work that hard that, Jerry told us what to do and when to do it, and we could pull it off and had really good matches with him. So I think the Jerichos and the Storms and the Benoits and all the guys that come out of Calgary that are good workers, I think probably learn more from Jerry than anyone realizes.
How about in Japan? Was there anybody that really helped you out there?
Not anyone specifically, especially because like FMW was just a one trip, and I'm not a big fan of the promotion or the majority of the workers there. And then by the time I got to War, I think it was November of 95, 96 when I started with War. I think at that point I was getting to be a pretty decent worker on my own. And so there wasn't anybody that I was like, oh, I'm under this guy's tutelage or anything. It was just getting to work with everybody. I obviously learned a lot working with Dragon. And even Jericho at that point in time, because I think Jericho was one of those guys that when it comes down to false finishes and really having a match build at the end is one of the best there is. And I found whenever I worked with Chris, and I worked with him a lot in Japan, he pushed me harder. And I don't know if it's whether I actually learned from him, but it was just one of those things where I think sometimes I might be, okay, we got the 3 or 4 false finishes and that's good. And it's like Jericho always wanted, an extra 2 or 3. So whenever I worked with him, I always felt like he made me work better. And I worked with him a lot in Japan as well, Dragon a lot. I was lucky, Jado and Gato I worked with a lot over there, and I really liked working with those guys.
Yeah. And how about, how did you like your time in Smoky Mountain Wrestling?
I had a lot of fun, especially lifestyle-wise, because I had just gotten married. And it was one of those things where I got to spend 24/7 with my wife, which some guys may not think is a plus, but I actually do. Because we moved to a nice apartment in Knoxville. The weather was great. It was a fun time. We lived in the same complex as Chris and Tammy did. And we were good friends with them. So it's like we had a night, go to a movie, go to dinner and stuff. We had a good family life there. And then it was like, drive every night and be home every night to the shows. And it was fun too, because it was our first real decent quality TV exposure, which was pretty cool. And the only real hard thing I had was playing the go-between with Jericho, because Jericho was working Mexico and Japan still, and we were working Well Done a lot. When our first run in Smoky, we were working for like 3 months every night, and it's like Well Done was very Memphis 101. You know what I mean? It's pull the hair, hide the gimmick. It's all the crap Memphis lazy stuff, which is fine, and that's what a lot of the fans wanted there. Realistically speaking, you do too many spots and crowds just like, what? Because it wasn't exactly the most advanced crowd in the world. But Jericho comes back from Japan and Mexico working with Negro Casas and Ultimo Dragon at 100 mile an hour, or working with Haku in Japan, stiff as hell, to Memphis 101. So it's like I've got Chris here and I've got Well Done here, and I'm trying to make it blend somehow. So it was really challenging that way, but it was a really good experience, and I had a lot of fun with it. And up until the tail end, when obviously money started being a little bit of an issue, and we started doing longer and longer road trips. Like when we first started, it was 2 hours, 3 at the most, out from Knoxville and back. And then at the end, they were 5-hour drives to some shows and stuff. So it was starting to be a bit of a pain that way. But it was a lot of fun. Like Ricky and Robert were always fun to be around. Chris was hilarious.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed Knoxville. It was a beautiful place. So it was a lot of fun. I was there less than a year. I think we started doing vignettes and stuff in February or January. Moved there right after I got married, which would have been May, and I was gone by November, so I wasn't there that long.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, working 15 shots a month was cool.
What did you think of those vignettes? Kind of gone down.
Those cheesy, god-awful vignettes. They were fun, and looking back on them, like, they're just atrocious.
When you guys were taping them, were you guys like, wow, this is great money-making stuff, or did you kind of...
Chris hated it, especially because it's like the music was out of date, and it's like, we did the one vignette in the hotel where the girls were meeting us or trying to track us down or whatever, and it's like he wasn't too happy with the caliber of ladies booked. Hopefully they aren't seeing this, but I don't remember who they were. It was just one of those things where it was so, even then it seemed cheesy and old, like not modern in any stretch, but it was fun. And it was funny too because, and this is one thing that when people ask me about Jimmy and Paul sort of contrasting each, it's like Jim is very much, I have an idea, I'm going to put somebody in it. Paul's very, I have somebody, I'll get an idea from them. And it's like he had this thrill seeker gimmick that he wanted to do forever apparently. And he saw me work and saw some of the stuff, and he said, oh man, this is going to be great, he can be a thrill seeker. But not realizing that I may physically do that kind of thing, but personality-wise, I'm anything but. So it was funny because we're doing these vignettes, we're supposed to be these wild and crazy, fun-loving, party-going guys, which is just so not me, it's ridiculous. And it was Jericho. So we're doing these vignettes, the one where we're at the arcade doing all the games and stuff, and Jericho's just being over-the-top cheesy. And it's one of those things where you can't compete with that. And I certainly can't. He's on a scale from 1 to 10, he's a 25 on the cheese meter, and I'm at about a 1.5. So it's like the vignettes ended up being him being stupid and me laughing at him. And which kind of worked in a weird sort of way, but it's like it was just so not me. And then we even did an interview thing sort of like this once. It was going to be a video thing, sort of, in the life of the thrill seekers or whatever. And it's like, oh, so what do you do for fun? And it's like, so I don't read a book. You know what I mean? It's like, what? It was so not me, and it was really the first chance to have to not just perform in the ring, but actually have a personality and a character and stuff, which was not what I had done up until that point. In Europe, it was strictly a legitimate sport World Cup tournament where you wrestled, and Japan was very much just that. So I hadn't found myself as a performer yet. I could wrestle and I could do the sport end of it, but I hadn't found the other stuff. I found that in ECW, and Jimmy really didn't give us any direction or help on that. But Chris, from the day he was born, he was, he could pull up the cheese meter and just be entertaining and a great personality, so it suited him so well. And I was just sort of okay, I'll be the straight man. But it was a lot of fun. Looking back, it's like, oh my God, did they do that stupid shit? But it was fun.
How was Jim Cornette to work for?
Jim is so much fun. Like, he's completely insane, but I love him. You know what I mean? He loves the business so much that you can't help but have fun around him. And he's genuinely one of the funniest guys you're ever going to meet. Like, he can just tell stories. You can sit there and listen to him for a year and a half telling stories. And it's like, even when I was in Louisville, it's like everybody kept saying, oh man, you've got to write a book, you've got to write a book, you've got so many great stories. I'm like, no, he can't write a book. He has to do a DVD. Because unless you have Jimmy's personality and all the stories, it's like it just wouldn't be the same reading it. But he is one of the most animated, hilarious people you've ever worked with. So being around him is always fun. And you have to, even if you disagree with some of the styles, and I disagree with some of his direction that he takes the business, you have to respect his love and passion for it. It's like he genuinely believes in what he does and loves what he does. So when he goes on his complete tirading rants and raves, it's because he loves the business so much. So it's a great atmosphere to be around, provided you're not the person that gets all down. Because I think some people, when he tends to be a little bit negative when he books. If it doesn't go the way he wants, it's like, oh, you know, you screwed this up. And some people sort of go, oh, I'm a bumble, I don't know what I'm doing. But you have to just take it, and that, you know, he's just doing it because he loves the business and he's trying to help you out constructively. He's more the negative reinforcement than the positive reinforcement as a booker, but he loves the business and he's so much fun to be around.
Yeah. Then what led to you guys leaving Smokey? I think that Jericho left before you, right? Yeah,
because Jericho broke his arm, and it was one of those things that we were fighting over money right from the get-go. And I think it was a thing where we had agreed on a price of $3,500 a month, I think. And it was more than he was paying other guys.
Yeah.
And because he was paying them considerably less, and then they'd sell all their merch and stuff. That's sort of a more U.S. thing. In Canada, we're not just all the big merch whores and stuff where we're out selling Polaroids and crap. We weren't really into that so much. So we really had no idea the whole, you know, sell the kitchen sink and everything you own that's signed by you. So we cut a deal where we get paid $3,500 a month. He'll pay us so much per night, and we get a merchandise money, but if it doesn't total that, he's got to make up the difference. And I think he miscalculated. It was one of those things where if I pay him $100 a night, that's $1,500 a month. You got to sell $2,000 of merchandise. I think we can do it. But it was $2,000 of merchandise a piece that he would have had to make. And we were just behind from the get-go. And the Def record label, whatever it was that he had as a financial backer, pulled out just after we got there.
Yeah.
So he was fighting his money the whole time, trying to make up what we were making. So when Jericho broke his arm, I think Jimmy saw that as his out and said, well, you know, I've got to rebuild you guys from scratch. I've got to renegotiate your money. And Jericho had Mexico and Japan. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm not renegotiating my money. I'll just go back to Japan. So he bailed out in probably August, maybe the beginning of September. Because I think the Night of Legends, where he worked with the broken arm, was in August.
Yeah.
But I was screwed because I had packed up my wife and actually moved to Knoxville. So I had a lease in an apartment in Knoxville. I had moved all my possessions down. I couldn't just pack up and move back to Calgary without taking a financial hit. And my only other place to get bookings really that I had a connection with was Otto. So which wasn't coming up till next season. So I really had nowhere to go. So I renegotiated my deal. And it was, you know, I don't know what it was, something a week. Plus I'd sell my own merchandise. And since it was my own deal with merchandise, I actually started making some because Jimmy never really got together to actually get us merchandise to sell. We had a few 4x6 photos and that was it. So I started actually doing halfway decent in merchandise, so I was working by myself from September to November. But then again, because I negotiated the weekly salary a little bit more than he was paying other guys, sort of, you know, pleading that, come on, I moved all the way down here for you, you can't screw me over too bad. And Jimmy's got a good heart and legitimately wanted to, you know, make good. So he was trying to find another financial backer at that point, and they were looking at it and said, okay, why are we paying this guy more a week than we're paying other guys? And Jimmy said, I just can't do it anymore. And I said, okay, fine. I had what I thought was a connection with All Japan with Candido that Dory Funk got us that looked like it was going to pan out in January. So I figured, you know what, okay, we're 2 months away from me going to Japan anyway. Why don't we just part ways on good terms, Jimmy? I'll head back home, thank you very much. And we parted on good terms. And then the All Japan thing fell through. Yeah. So I ended up going back to Calgary and, you know, working just the local crap there for 4 or 5 months until I could get back to Germany with Otto and Peter Williams.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you finally end up in the ECW?
I was working in War. Jericho got me that, well, Jericho and Dragon. Jericho was the one that got me in the door, but I was lucky enough that I worked with Dragon on a Winnipeg show. Oddly enough, Jericho got Dragon.
Ultimate Dragon, right?
Ultimate Dragon got booked there with Jericho just for fun, and I was working with him. And Orihara got hurt yet again. I don't know what, he broke something again doing his crazy flips, and they needed somebody for their junior tour, like in 10 days or whatever, and I was working there with Dragon at the time, so it's like Jericho put in a word for me. Dragon had seen me work and said, we need somebody. Hey, can you be ready to go in 10 days? And I said, yeah, so I got the War gig. Jericho had left War Jericho was working both War and ECW at the time, and he had just left ECW for WCW, and I was starting to sense that War was having financial trouble. You know, the gates were coming down, and you could tell that things weren't looking all that good, so I'm like, I better cover my ass this time. I don't want another Smoky Mountain on my hands where, you know, I have to leave before I'm ready. So I had called Jericho and said, you know, can you put in a word for me with Paul? I think maybe I should try to get some work in the States while I'm still working in War. And he said, well, he knows your work. You don't need to put in a word for him. Just call him. So I said, well, this is a number I have. He says, well, that's the one. Call him. He says, just don't expect him to call you back anytime soon. Because I think Jericho took like 6 months of phone tag with the guy before he did. And Chris said, just phone him every 2 to 3 weeks. Just leave your name and your number, say you're interested in coming in. He says, eventually he'll have an idea and he'll call you. So I phoned Paul, left a message. I think I only called him for maybe 2 or 3 times. It was only about a month or so. I guess I got lucky he had an idea sooner. And then you called me and said, you know, Paul wants to know your Japanese dates. He's interested in maybe using you between tours. When are you going to be home? And I'm like, well, I leave Monday. I think it was like a Friday. And then I'm gone for 2 weeks. I'll be back on the whatever. And you said, okay, I'll call you back. And it was, Paul wants you at the arena tomorrow. Because if not, we've got to wait till the next one, which is a month away. Can you be here tomorrow? And I actually debated, because I remember Jericho telling me that Paul called him back and wanted him like on a day's notice. And Chris, who's more the businessman than I am, I like just being more straightforward. I don't like to play the businessman end of it. Turned it down, saying he didn't want to seem that eager. So he said, no, I can't make it this time, but if you want to use it next time, you could. So I was debating on playing that card or not. I didn't want to seem too eager. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't like doing things last minute. But I really wanted to get my foot in the door. So I said, yeah, okay, I can, you know, if you can get me there on time for tomorrow and get me out in time on Sunday that I can leave Monday for Japan, I'll do it. And so I was like, okay, Paul will call you back in an hour. And, you know, at 4 o'clock in the morning, Paul calls me, yeah, I got you coming in. You're on a flight at 6:30. I have to leave the airport in 20 minutes. Paul, thanks. Talk to you later. Click. And basically, you know, had 20 minutes sleep and went to the airport and showed up at the arena for my match with Balls. Was he Balls then? Yeah, I guess he was Balls right from the beginning.
Yeah. What was your first impressions of ECW?
I really liked it. I think the biggest thing was it's one of those things where I tend to be shyer when I first meet people. Once I get to know them, I turn into a bit of a completely different person. And it's funny because everybody thinks, oh man, you've really loosened up, we've given you a sense of humor. It's like, no, I always had it. I just, you know, I'm quiet when I first meet people. So everybody thinks they're the one that brought me out of my shell, but it's actually just every time I meet somebody, it takes a while to get there. So whenever I first went to a territory, I usually had heat for the guy with the attitude. And I think it was one of the things I was pretty good at my job, so I was like, he's good and he's quiet, so he thinks he's great, and he's got a big head, which wasn't the case. But with ECW, because I had known Candido from Smokey and a few other guys, I sort of had an in to be a little bit more open when I first got there, that I felt more welcome when I first got there, and I thought the locker room really had a, hey, welcome, I hope you can come here and enjoy. It was very much a team effort. It wasn't the, oh shit, this guy might take my spot. It was, man, oh God, this guy could actually, be a good part of our locker room and help our product. And I even remember after I went out and worked with Balls, when I first came back through, Todd Gordon, who was still with the company at that point in time, met me at the curtain and just shook my hand and said welcome. And I thought, that's pretty damn cool. It wasn't a good match or a, hey, you're here. It was just welcome. And it's like I really felt like, even from my first match, that I was welcome and belonged. So it was really a cool feeling right from the get-go.
Yeah. Is that the kind of locker room atmosphere that Paulie created to really separate ECW?
I don't know if he created it because it was created before I got there, but it was certainly the atmosphere that was there.
Yeah.
And Paul.
Is that part of what led to ECW being so special? Is that?
I think so. And it's funny because there's so many jokes and stuff about Paul with the magic Kool-Aid. He had us all fooled and doing everything. But it really, Paul's an incredible motivator. And I said this once in an interview. It's like even if no one in the pro wrestling industry ever hired him again, it's like the NFL should hire him. Any team, any sports team should hire this guy as a motivator. Because he really made all of us feel that we were doing something special and that we were involved in something special, and it made the job so much more rewarding because it didn't feel like you were just doing it for a paycheck. It felt like you were doing it for the company and that we were part of the company. And it was just always fun to come to work because you felt like coming to work mattered. There was one weekend, it was a Boston loop, I did a commentary about it one time where my shoulder was bothering me or something, and Paul offered me the weekend off. So why don't you just stay home? I was still going to get paid. And there was like one or two other guys out hurt at the time. And I said, no, I'll come to work anyway. I was like, I could have stayed home and got paid, but I thought that me not being on the shows would have hurt the company, and I came because I thought it mattered. And it's like very few other places that I worked, if I was told you can get paid and stay home or you can get paid and come to work, would I have come to work? And it's like in ECW I did, because it's like I felt like I belonged and I was part of it, and it wasn't just this company that's making money and we're working for them. It was we were actually all part of the mix, and I think that's what was special about it. And I think I even did it was a thing, I was in an interview or something, I was talking to somebody and I say, oh, you know, Paul was Kool-Aid, had all you guys fooled, and it's like, you know what, I'd give my eye teeth for another cup of Kool-Aid because I really enjoyed it. And it's like, you know, whether it be the fans that he had, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid, it was a cult and everything else, but it's like the fans felt like they were involved, we felt like we were involved, and it's like, even if he did have us fooled, he had us all fooled into being happy. I can think of worse things being fooled into.
Yeah. What do you think of the angle of being the triple threat prospect?
That was a lot of fun. I think that was the time that I came into my own, that I really became a pro wrestling commodity instead of just a good wrestler. And a lot of that's due to Candido and Paul, because Chris was great, and I'm going to end up getting sad here talking about him, but he's very much like Cornette, that he just absolutely loved the business and lived for the business, and I think he was a big part of me getting booked there. I found out sort of afterwards, I think when it came time for who else could I use, Chris was pushing for me from our time in Smokey, so when my number and name came up, it's like, oh, I could do something. And Chris pushed a lot for that angle, I think, and getting to work with Shane was a lot of fun, because I really liked Shane's work and liked him as well, and Candido, and then doing the connection with Bam Bam and stuff was a lot of fun, because I'd actually worked with Bam Bam a lot more. So it was a great time and a lot of fun, and doing promos, because I sucked at promos. And it was Paul and Chris helping me through them that actually sort of got me lightening up. I remember the first promo I did that I actually thought was good. We'd done something with Chris where he was being the knob, you know, just being the, you know, you can't put the three fingers up, you can't do that. Or it was a lot of fun. It's like I finished it, I grabbed him, I gave him a kiss on the cheek and said thank you, because it was actually the first promo that I did that I actually felt was good. And probably if I watch it now, I'd think it sucked, but at the time it was the first time that I actually started having a presence on camera that wasn't Lance Evers, that I was actually sort of finding something. And I owe a lot of that to Chris. And Paul as well. Paul taught me a lot of the technical stuff, but it was being comfortable enough with Chris, and especially when we did the whole stuff with Tammy, where it was, you know, 3/4, half shoot, whatever you want to call it, where we were, and it was just him being willing to say, there's no borders, there's no limits, do whatever you can do.
What's like some examples of?
Well, it's like when Tammy first came back and we did the promo stuff about, you know, her having the revolving door in the locker room and how she got her job, and the, you know, the heartbreak chick and all the other stuff that we did, and we even did stuff talking about, you know, we did the stuff with the steroid use, we did, you know, their drug habits and stuff. It's like we did any rumor that was out there, true or false or whatever. You know, if the fans perceived it to be true, whether it was true or not, we could hit on it. And there was a couple times where I even went and asked, it's like, can we do this? And I think the first one we did the thing with Tammy at the arena, where we talked about, you know, the revolving door in the locker room and the heartbreak chick, and it was something else. Paul said to us, look, okay, we need you to hit her with 3 really hard somethings. It's like, find it out. So we just, Chris, Tammy, and we just sat down and said, what can I say? And they were, whatever gets heat, gets a reaction, can get this thing over. They didn't care. True, false, or otherwise, it's like, it's wrestling, it's fake, whatever you want to say what you want. And it just allowed me to relax and be me, because I tend to be a little bit stiff on the smart mouth tongue to begin with. Because we even joked a while, it's like, that's how the only reason they put up with my stiff mouth in the locker room was because I worked so late in the ring. And it was just the ability to just pull out all the stops and do whatever you wanted allowed me to just relax and do whatever I want and have fun. And it was that angle that really let me sort of come into my own. And actually, I wasn't supposed to be the heel at the end of that program. I was supposed to be the babyface. Paul wanted me to turn heel enough to get the crowd to like me. And when we first did the whole thing where I turned on him, it's like the crowd started getting behind Chris and started hating me. And Candido was hot because he didn't want to be a babyface. I don't want to be a babyface. I want to be the heel. And Paul's like, sorry, that's the way it's going. Which I think is also the brilliance in Paul's booking, is that he doesn't try to swim upstream. He'll book an idea, and it doesn't have the only solution is this is where this angle goes. We'll do this and we'll see what happens. And if the crowd gets behind me, we'll go this way. And if the crowd gets behind Chris, we'll go this way. And I think a lot of booking, well, story writing now, they don't even book. It's, oh, we have this idea and this is what's going to happen. And it's like, well, what if the crowd doesn't buy it? And Paul always left the options open, and originally I was the one that was supposed to be the babyface out of it. Dawn Marie was supposed to be just a one-time shot to get Tammy over. But the crowd started going that way and getting, disliking me and liking Chris. And when Dawn Marie did the first night, I said, you know what, I think there's something here that we could do with. If you want to keep her around, I'd like to work with her. And it took off and ended up being, 2.5 years of me as a heel with Dawn. That was, I think some of the best stuff I've done in my career. That wasn't supposed to be that way, but it just happened.
So you like the idea of Dawn Marie as your valet?
Yeah, we did the first night where it was, originally I was told it was going to be Marlena. That Tammy had a good relationship with her from New York, and it was just going to be basically just, girl A to come in and get, beat up by Tammy, to get Tammy over for her first time, full time with the company at the arena. And for whatever reason, Marlena didn't come, didn't want to come, couldn't come, I don't know what it was. And I think Tammy or Chris knew Dawn from some indies, and they said, so she was just, here's girl A, she's going to get her clothes ripped off and beat up. And it was one of those things where I liked Dawn right from the beginning, because it was like, we want you to do this, and she's like, okay. It wasn't the, well, how come, and she knew that she was getting sacrificed for the sake of Tammy, and it wasn't about her, and she didn't try to get her shit in. She just did what she was told. And I thought the thing went fairly well, and I think it was one of those things too that I knew that I wasn't a complete three-dimensional performer yet. And I think I saw, with her, maybe I can fill some of the gaps that I still had. So I said to Paul, I said, this went fairly well tonight. Why don't we, if you're up for it, why don't we take it around the horn and see what it is? So we did all the house show loops, or all the house show, whatever, all the other shots other than the arena, with her, basically doing the same similar thing or whatever. And it was working well, and I got along with her. And I think Paul realized that, this might be the final piece of the puzzle with Lance. So we ended up doing it, permanently. And Dawn was also one of those people too, where there's a lot of people that, work real hard, and then once they get the gig, they relax. Whereas she, once she got the gig, it's like she trained twice as hard and got in even better shape, and, started, looking hotter and playing. It was like she constantly worked to improve herself too. So she was constantly finding her own thing, and then just the character and personality she came up with just sort of seemed to blend really well with me, that it was just so much fun with. So,
yeah,
it was great.
Did you have any problems working with Dawn and Francine? Because there's a lot of heat, I guess, between Dawn and Francine.
Yeah, there's a little bit of heat. Yeah, I didn't have problems with it. I felt somewhat a little bit in the middle of it at times, obviously, because there would be. This was obviously later when we were doing the program with Dreamer, and I think it was some resentment probably because the fact that Dreamer was booking at the time, and Franny was pushed so strong that whether it was because she was his girlfriend or not, I think is irrelevant. There's perception that way that she's getting her way because, which caused resentment. And really, most locker rooms in the business, the girls tend to have a fair bit of this. It's like the guys are like that too, but the girls tend to get even more at each other. I think it's because it's such a smaller group that there's only 2 or 3 spots for girls, so they really have to fight it out to get them. Or at least with guys, there's a dozen spots that we're fighting for. So there's a lot of that. So I had to hear a lot about it because Dawn Marie was fairly vocal. And we had a good enough relationship that she talked to me a lot. So I had to hear a lot of it and deal with it. But there was tension, but they always seemed to manage to put it aside when it came time to do the ring. It's like, whatever had to be done on the show got done and got done well. They were professional to do it that way. I never, maybe Tommy heard the same from his side, but I had never heard any complaints from Franny. I only got Dawn Marie's side of it, which, is probably not 100% the truth. It never is. I don't know what Tommy got from his end. But, there was tension there. But there was tension there to a certain extent with Tammy, even, when we started doing it. Especially when they came back after their suspension / whatever it was. There was a fair bit of shoot tension there, I think. Which I think ended up coming across great on camera, because, again, we were shooting on each other promo-wise. That, there's even some promos they did with, Miss, you're only supposed to be here one night. And, she sort of ended up taking the spot, especially when they got sent away for a while, whether they were fired, suspended, who knows what the truth was. But there was she was supposed to be in one night to get them off and running, but we ended up getting off and running, and they sort of had other issues and so forth. So there was tension there too, that we sort of had to, fight our way through. But for the most part, other than, a few complaints and, grumblings, which is there all the time in the business, they always managed to get it done in the ring the way they're supposed to.
Now, when did you start having a say in the booking, and what exactly was your role in the booking of ECW?
It started Dawn Marie's first night. It was Chris and I with Tammy, her first official night in the arena, with Dawn, and we were in the one locker room area, what I used to call the executive offices. It was a real dingy crap area at the back. And there was that one room that wasn't bad where Shane used to change in. So when I started doing the triple threat thing, I'm like, oh, can I change in the executive offices? So I started changing in there too. But we're trying to put this finish together, and it's like we got to the point where Dawn Marie gets all her clothes stripped off, she's in her bra and her thong and stuff, and Paul's like, okay, well, we want to show Tammy's butt too, so we come up with the idea where I'd suplex her in a little skirt and fall down, everybody get to see her ass too. We're all sitting there going, what's the out? How do we get to the finish? And it was, Chris was going to go over on me, how are we going to get to the finish? And I come up with the idea, what if Chris hits me from behind and Tammy pins me? And Paul's face just lit up, and everybody else in the locker room was like, what, you're going to put over a girl? I'm like, no, it's great. It's like, I'm supposed to be, this is great heat. I said, it's not like she's beating me up. Chris is knocking me out with the chain in the back of the head or whatever. I said, this would be great. And when Paul's face lit up, he pulled me aside and he says, at that moment I realized that you get it. It's not about getting my shit in. It's not about who goes over. It's like, where's the heat? And he said, at that moment, he said, he realized that I got the big picture, and I started being able to contribute creatively from that point. And it did work, you know what I mean? It's like, and all the boys were even thrilled more so, because when she did the small package, it ended up that her ass was to the hard camera again, and they got the good, the good butt shot on the 3 count too. And I think it also gave me the heat I needed as a heel, because with ECW, sort of the smart fans and everything else, it's like if you are a really good worker and have really good matches, as much as they want to hate you, they want to appreciate you. But it sort of gave them that one thing they could get on. You got pinned by a girl. It gave them that one legitimate thing to harp on me for. And I could, of course, sell it big and deny it and everything else. So it worked out really great from a personality standpoint. And that was the light bulb that went off in Paul's head, so this guy gets it.
Were you pretty much just booking your own stuff, or did you have say in other parts of the card?
I pitched him a lot of ideas. By the end, like when we were actually on TNN, there was a tail end where we actually had what was pretty much a booking committee at that point in time, that Raven, Dreamer, Paul and I would sit down and do TV. But before that, even before Raven came back, there was times where just Paul and I were sitting down and doing the whole show. It started with a few ideas for myself, but I'd come to him with other ideas and stuff. I'd have like, oh, this is something you can do with Taz, or this is something you can do with him. So I was contributing ideas that weren't just my own. And then at the point, it was the point where he'd sit down at TV, and this is when he was really starting to get burned out with keeping the company afloat. But there was TVs where he'd walk, he'd show up at the building, Lance, come here, and he'd sit down, please, what are we doing tonight? And we'd start from match 1 through to match whatever, and book the whole show. And then there was times too where the 3-way dance that we were building to with Jerry Lynn and I, that was one of my favorite angles that we were building up to. Jerry and I did the pay-per-view in September, whatever the hell it was, and he basically said that 6 weeks from now you guys are going to be doing a 3-way with Mikey Whipwreck. Do what you want. That you're here now, you need to get here in 3 months, do whatever you want. So each week I'd show him, this is what you got. And Jerry was helping a lot too, because I was traveling with Jerry, so I was like, Jerry, what do you want to do? And we, as we're driving, we pitch ideas together and stuff, then we get to TV, and I'm like, okay, Paul, this week we're going to do this. Okay, great, go do it. And I was doing a lot of my own stuff at that point, but I was still throwing ideas in for other ideas and stuff too. But it was the night that I decided I wanted to be pinned by Tammy that he realized that I got the bigger picture.
Yeah. What are some of the ideas that you had that you're most proud of?
It's one of my favorite segments I ever did was the urine test that I did with Dreamer. It was one of those things where it started out of, I was just shooting on Dreamer for having a fat ass in promos. And it was one of those things where I asked him ahead of time, do you mind? He said, whatever. He says, just as long as you're willing to take the rebuttal. I'm like, whatever. And so I was getting on him for being a fat ass and everything else in promos, and he'd come back with, I'm going to hit you with the, I might be a fat ass, please, I'm not on the gas. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. Because it's one of those things where I've been fighting the image of, oh, he's on the gas my whole career. Yeah. And, there's 2 or 3 people that actually believe me, but it's like I've been clean my entire career, and I didn't really want to go down that road. And it was Don Callis who pulled me aside. He said, people think it anyway, you might as well make money off it. I'm like, true enough. He says, whether you do an angle where somebody accuses you or not, it's not going to really change anybody's impression, so why don't you let them do it? So I said, okay, so that's when I come up with the idea of the urine test thing, where I'll go out and claim to be clean and that I'm going to prove it because I've got my urine sample here, and I challenged Dreamer to prove the same thing. And I did some kind of promo. I saw a picture of you once where you're actually in shape, and I know you're a lazy slob who's never been to a gym, so I'm guessing you had help. And we did the whole thing with the urine testing thing, and actually Callis wanted me to throw the urine in Dreamer's face. And I said, the ECW crowd will pop for that. I said, I don't want to get cheered. I said, he's got to throw it in mine. Down. Well, we don't do that. It's like, no, it's one of those things of, to be a good heel, that's the way it has. You can't do something cool, and that, I think, is, the Austin era of screw you being cool. If I suckered Dreamer and threw urine in his face, I think they'd laugh at Tommy and cheer me. So I said, we can't do it that way. He's got to get me. So we did the whole promo. And I actually liked the promo too, because I kind of shot on the boys in the locker room and wear the t-shirts and stuff. And then did the thing where he ended up hitting me with his finish and throwing the urine in my face. Although there was a follow-up backstage segment that was supposed to be that Paul told me we'd do and then never filmed.
What was that?
Well, it was one of those things that, since we had another match coming up, it's like, I wanted the heat at the end of it. Because if he gets the final laugh, to me the angle's over.
Yeah.
So it's like we needed a follow-up, and it was sort of the debate, because Callis says, well, you throw it in his face, because then he's got to come back to get his revenge. And I'm like, yeah, but I'll get cheered, we can't do that, we need another thing. So what I wanted to do is do the backstage thing, where later in the show, there's the ruckus in the back and there's the camera, and I've jumped Dreamer from behind and just beat him to death in the locker room, running through a locker a few times, stand over top and start buckling my pants and have to pull the camera away as you hear me urinating on him. Do you think you want to piss in my face and everything else, and lay him out and do it to him? That way when there's the match, because I think we came back with, eventually there was a pay-per-view where we did the extreme death match thing that we did from Poughkeepsie. It's like, well, there's no heat if he got the last laugh. So when I pitched the idea to Paul, he says, yeah, that's great, we'll do it. We're going to film it during the day, and he's like, no, we'll have to get it tonight after the show, we'll do it after, we do the thing in the ring. It's like, okay, we did it, and then it's like, yeah, we'll do it later, and then they never did it. I'm like, you bugger. You know what I mean? You didn't follow up with the rest of the angle, which I was disappointed about, but at least the in-ring thing I thought was great.
Yeah. Were there any ideas that you had that didn't quite play out the way that you wanted them to, or you're disappointed in how they actually played out in the ring?
There was an angle that I had pitched that we didn't get to do that I was really disappointed about. It was right when Taz and Shane were doing the program for the title. I was of the impression that they were going to leave the title on Shane. So I come up with an idea, and I went to Paul, I said, well, if you're going to keep the title on Shane, you need some kind of angle to get Taz out of that picture, because he was the babyface, and it's one of those things where I hate, if the heel's going to go over, it's like you need something for the babyface to save face, so I always think you need a hot angle to pull away an issue that's, even more so. So I had pitched an angle that if he wanted to get Taz out of the title picture, that he could go with me. And it was one of those things where, and again on the half shoot thing, it started with a promo where I made fun of his height, because that was something that Taz gets a little bit sensitive about. But where I wanted the program to go was, I start complaining that he's protected by the company. It's like his chokes, and his finish is a choke, which is illegal. It's like, I choke somebody in the corner, they threaten to DQ me, why does he get to use it as a finish? The truth be told, I was trained in Calgary, I can out suplex Taz, I can out wrestle Taz, but everybody's like, oh, that's Taz's deal, don't, do the thing, well, suplexes are Taz's deal, don't throw those, and the choke, yeah, but it's Taz. Just basically accusing being coddled by the office, and standards aren't the same. So do the match with Taz, where, actually I was going to pitch the out suplexing him thing, and to hit, there was a one line on him being short, I was going to hit to get him hot, and have him just beat the living hell out of me. Have the match where he beats me, and then I complain that the choke's illegal, and again, it's the company, and do the match where we ban the choke. Ban the Taz mission, and wanted to do the video build-up for it, where they show the fact that he's beating everybody. He's beating this guy, he's beating Bam Bam, he's beating this guy, but it is always T-Bone Taz mission, and build the angle of can Taz win without the Taz mission. And I wanted to build to the match where if he uses the Taz mission, he's disqualified. And I wanted to build up to the finish where he goes to the Taz mission and realizes he can't. I scoop behind and put him in it. Because it's not illegal for me to use it. Rather, I'm really going the cheap end to it. And even have him, of course, it's his finish. He ends up countering, putting me in and choking me out. And then I get my hand raised. And it's like I'm the guy that beat Taz. And I beat Taz by having him choke me out. You know what I mean? So, and then work your way through there if, and we build another match. Well, okay, this time Taz, if you actually use the Taz mission, you know what I mean? Not only are you disqualified, but you can't ever use it again. Some kind of thing where we keep stacking the deck against Taz so much that I can actually keep getting these, completely ridiculous, unworthy wins over him, and trying to keep that angle enough to get him out of the title picture. But they ended up putting the title on Taz and didn't need it. Yeah. I just thought it would have been neat, especially the video package with the T-Bone and the Taz mission every time.
How about Raven? He's done shoots with us, and he's admitted that he was on a lot of drugs during that whole time period. But did that make him difficult to work with, or could you tell the difference whether he was sober or?
Well, that was really the only time that I knew him, so I just thought that was Raven. I didn't know whether it was pills, drugs, alcohol, or what. That was Scotty.
Yeah. And
it was funny because I expected to hate him. I had heard a lot of things about him, and I didn't expect to be anywhere near the same page with the guy, and which was really weird. Obviously we didn't hang out and party together because we were different kind of people there, but as far as at the building, we were really on the same page, and I actually enjoyed working with him. And he wasn't in the greatest of shape at the time, but he was a babyface when I worked with him. He was one of the easiest babyfaces I ever worked with, because he just seemed to know where to sell. That as a heel, he was just so easy to work with, that he just always seemed to be exactly where I wanted him to be for me to beat him up. So it was easy to work with him. And then we started actually booking together with Paul too. And I think he thought it was absurd as I did that we actually got along and seemed to see things the same way. And we actually really complemented each other, because he was more creative and out there than I was, but I was more detail conscious and accurate. That together we really played well, because he came up with this idea. I'm like, okay, yeah, but because of this we've got to change it. And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. And I think we actually worked really well together, which I think surprised him as much as it did me. And we ended up teaming up on Tommy a lot too, because so I think that there was the natural sort of, we've been friends too long that we have to butt heads connection with Dreamer and Scotty. And I knew Tommy better, so I was more friends with Tommy, but I was more on the same page with Scotty from a booking standpoint, so it was a really weird dynamic. And I don't think Tommy liked we'd agree, and I think he felt like we were teaming up on him to kibosh his angles and stuff, so he'd get his back up. And it was really funny that Scotty and I started ribbing him about it. Because there was one time, I think it was Milwaukee for some reason, we were doing the one thing where Paul's like, come on guys, we're going to sit down and put the show together. And Tommy had an idea, and Scotty jumped on it right away. No, that's the shits, you can't do that. And I agreed with Scotty, and Tommy got mad and just sort of grabbed, there was one of the things where there was a bunch of Pro Wrestling Illustrated 500 come out that month or whatever. Tommy had it, Tommy just took his magazine and went away and read, and so we started ripping him about, oh yeah, just take your mark back and go read, Tommy. So it was weird that we were on the same page and got along so well, because anyone that knows him and his lifestyle over the years and mine would have thought we would probably hate each other. Hack was a bit like that too. I expected and wanted to hate him so bad, but didn't. But for some reason, when it actually came to wrestling, it's like I realized that he actually had good intentions and actually knew more than I thought he would. And it's one of those things, when I first got there, I expected to just completely hate Sandman and want to kill him, and didn't.
Was it, now you're a pretty straight-laced guy, and of course everyone's heard about the ECW locker room and the party and all that kind of stuff. Did you have a hard time fitting in with the locker room just because your personality was so different?
I don't think so. It was one of those things where I think there was enough, I think, respect for ability and separation from in-ring to out that it didn't cross that much. I think it was one of those things where when the show ended, I left and went to my room, and they went and did whatever the hell they wanted to do. So it was one of those things where we just didn't cross those paths. So I remember Don Callis one time described me as just being slightly straighter than the Pope, which I thought was funny. So yeah, I didn't fit the ECW mentality at the time, but I think for the most part, they did their thing and I did mine, and especially because as ECW got bigger, they sort of, as much as they didn't want to admit it, there was sort of their cliques and their groups and stuff. And I traveled with Jerry, and we left the arena, we ate, went to bed, and got up and went to the gym, and that's what we did. And other guys may have went to the bar and partied till 10 a.m. or whatever it was, and that's what they did. And for the most part, any drug use wasn't hey, break out the whatever right in the middle of the locker room. Everybody had their own little thing, and it wasn't as visual unless you looked for it. So I never looked for it and didn't see it all that much. Occasionally you could see things that probably shouldn't have been going on, but it wasn't some big drug orgy in the back or anything.
Did you ever get concerned about working with somebody that might not have been in proper shape to work?
I never had that problem, because even when all the stories and the rumors and everything were hitting heavy that that Candido was out of control and everything else, it's like I never saw it in him. He was always 100% there for me in the ring. Because I had a lot of people say, "Oh man, you think it's like Chris was always 100% reliable in the ring, and I never had a concern." I did at one point go to Paul and kibosh the angle with Tammy. It was a house show, I think, in Revere at the dog track, that crappy little building. And it was one of those things where Tammy was a mess. And I went to Paul and said, Dawn Marie's not doing the spot with her. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I'm not letting Dawn Marie get hurt. She's not doing it. Well, yeah, but it's just, she's not doing it, Paul. Do whatever you want, but she's not doing it. Because I just didn't think Dawn was safe in her hands, and I looked after Dawn. It was, her and I were a team, and it's like, I looked after her like she was me. And it's like, no, she's not going out there and doing that. I'm not letting her get hurt. But there was never anybody that I was in the ring with that I ever thought that I was at risk at all. And whether they were giving up whatever, it's like that never showed to them, or I never felt like I was in a position where I was at all at risk. I was also very smart in what I did too. It's like I didn't do a lot of the hardcore crazy crap. And as you know, I didn't let guys, pick me up and dump me on my head. So it was one of those things where even if they weren't 100%, I was safe.
Okay.
But I never felt like I went to the room with anybody that wasn't there for me. Yeah. Other than Tammy was a little wobbly. And actually, I think on that Rivera show, the crowd chanted, "She's effed up." The crowd was chanting that on her ring entrance. And it's like I slipped the ball. It's like it's not happening, right? And Chris and I did whatever, and they just never did the girl spot.
Yeah. And looking at the Impact players, did you, and this is just my opinion, I don't know if you can agree or disagree with this, was there any pressure, did you feel, for you and Justin to replace the Dudleys as like the top heel tag team? Do you think that was, because it was really when the Dudleys left that you guys really started getting pushed to that next level. Did you see it as maybe something where it's like Paul saw you guys as being able to take that spot?
ECW was such a different atmosphere, I never felt it that way. To me it was, oh man, here's a great opportunity, we can now, it was one of those things where I think, maybe I'm just too cocky, but it's like I felt that I, could fill any spot, and to me it was just like, hey, now there's an even better chance to step up and take this spot. So I never felt the pressure that we had to perform to it. I just said, wow, we've got, one less group to have to compete with, that we're going to have even more of a chance now. I just thought it was a great opportunity for us to not have to compete with trying to get that spot from the Dudleys who had been there longer than us. So I just thought it was an opportunity and thought it was great. I never once thought there was we've got to replace them, we have to step up. I just, was like, oh great, we're going to be doing it. We've been doing the Impact players for a while at that point. Yeah. And I think also too the fact that, I was working with Paul at that point, that I didn't ever think that, there was, pressure to form, I had to worry about my spot. It's like I felt like I was, pretty entrenched in the company and confident enough in my ability. And especially because we were so much different than the Dudleys. They did a lot of other stuff, but I think I always looked at it as far as, the actual match and wrestling. And it's like I think I could hold my own with anybody they had, so I never really thought about it. It was just, okay, this is just another spot we get, so.
Whose idea was it for you and PJ to team up?
PJ and I had been pulling for Paul to let us work each other since I showed up, because PJ was, I want to work with you, because I had trained him and stuff, and we hadn't seen each other in a while, so he was just always begging, let us work, let us have a match, let us have a match, and Paul just went, no. And then there was the one chance at the arena where he was doing his feud with Tommy. I think it was after they did the 10-bell salute for his grandfather or his dad or whoever it was, where Peach caned him. So he was in his feud with Dreamer. I think he was just sort of finishing up with his feud with Dreamer, and I was just getting ready to have mine, so they ended up booking the three-way dance at the arena with Peach, Tommy, and I. And just because we were both heels and Tommy was the face, it made sense to, at some point in time in the match, we end up teaming up on him and getting the heat on Tommy. And I think at that point in time, Paul saw something. So, well, these guys have been begging to wrestle each other. Actually, they look good together. Maybe I'll stick them together as a group. So out of that three-way, we started doing a little bit of tagging stuff. And then Paul decided, look, we need to give you guys, we're going to make you guys a team. And Peach wanted a group name, not a tag team name, but a group name somewhat similar to DX, because he was obviously the big, Razor Sean clip mark. Because he hung with them and was tight with them, and he thought the whole DX thing was cool. So he wanted some kind of name like that. And Paul came up with Impact Players, and Peach and I hated it. And I was like, no, we don't like it, Paul, we don't like it, Paul. He said, well, you got anything better? No. Well, then shut up. Basically, you're the Impact Players. And then, of course, we ended up falling in love with it and liking it. But Paul came up with the name, but I think it was, we kept bitching and saying we wanted to work each other. Finally, he gave us a chance in the three-way to sort of work against each other, and it saw something as a group and put us together.
Yeah. What do you think of Jason with the group?
Jason was always a good team player and did what he had to do, but his stuff was more on the comedic end that I didn't like it as much. So I always it was one of those things that I always considered him with Peach. It's like, to me, he wasn't part of me. And it's like some fans, it's like, oh, Don remanaged the Impact Players. It's like, no, Don remanaged me. Jason managed him. As a group, we're the Impact Players. Like I kept that fence apart. But, Jason always did what he was told. And it's like there was times where we, needed him to get sacrificed and just get, speared by Jazz or something, and he always did what he was told. And he was always putting the group effort, but it's just, we were never on the same page as buddies or friends and stuff. And I the whole, I'm Jason the sexiest man alive, I just, I'm like, nah, that's PJ's thing, that's not part of my group.
What are some of your favorite memories or favorite matches or angles with the Impact Players?
Possibly my favorite match was the Jado and Gato match at the arena. Because I was tight with Jado and Gato from War, and I know they dreamed of working with ECW as well. Oh, we got to go work ECW, we want to work the arena. And I begged Paul forever to book these guys, and he finally agreed and booked them. And so it was cool because I knew it was a dream for them, and I knew we could have a great match with them. And then the fact that they worked the night before in Asbury Park and stunk the joint out with Danny and Roadkill. I think it was just one of those things too where they were trying to be, I don't want to step on any toes, I'll do what you want. And Danny and Roadkill were in awe of, you're Jado and Gato, I don't want to do anything I want to do. And they ended up just going out there and doing nothing. And it was horrible. And everyone was expecting the arena match to flop. And I think part of it too, because I'd been booking for a while with Paul, and most of what I had touched at that point in time had worked. So this was the one time I think a lot of the locker room was like, he's going to have one come back and bite him in the ass now. And I think everyone was enjoying it a little bit. And even Joey pulled me aside and says, man, I don't know how you're going to pull this one out. And we did. So it was like even more so because it's like I come back just grinning like the Cheshire Cat going, I showed all you guys. So it was sort of a big triumph in the locker room and from a booking standpoint that it was such a good match too that when Jado and Gato went to the ring, the crowd farted on him. It was like, who are you guys? And then halfway through the match they're chanting FMW at them. It was so great to not only give it to Jado and Gato because they wanted it so much, but to prove everybody wrong and then really put up a match that I liked. It was great.
Are you surprised that Tommy Dreamer has such a high office position in WWE now? Did you see the qualities of that in him in ECW?
I think it's a good spot for him because Tommy's really smart. Like he really understands the business. He's he's very, very smart, and he's also very, very likable. It's like everybody likes him, and he really knows what he's doing. So I think it's a good spot because it's one of those spots where if you work in the office, you're going to get heat, and but the fact that everybody likes Tommy so much, it's like I think it's easier to deal with him because they like him so much, and he is a really smart guy. So I think it's a good spot for him. I think he could have been used more in front of the camera first, but I think it was just one of those things he didn't have the cosmetics they were looking for.
Yeah.
Despite how talented and over he was.
Yeah. Now, what led to you leaving ECW?
It was strictly money. It was, I was still getting my check, but I knew others weren't. And I knew they were struggling, and it was, in a bad financial way. And I just, I had bought a house, had a wife, and two kids at the time? 2 kids at the time. So it's just one of those things where I need to support my family, I need to look after myself, so I needed to start looking elsewhere. And it was one of those things where Paul had the tight connection with WWE, and from what I had understood at that point, anyone that had reached out to WWE word got back to Paul. So I didn't see WWE as an option. And so I put feelers out for WCW to see what was there. And it was strictly a financial decision. I loved working for Paul and I loved ECW, but I had some family to support and had to look out for that.
Yeah. Did Paul make any kind of big effort to keep you?
No. He, basically said he'd love to have me and so forth, but he couldn't obviously afford to offer me more money because guys weren't getting what they were being paid to begin with. And I think he knew, I think I could have asked for the title and he would have given it to me, but I've never been a mark that way and I wouldn't want it that way. I was open with Paul. I told him when I was talking with WCW because I didn't want to surprise him and backstab him in any way. And he acknowledged that I had to do it and was fairly supportive. I think he was, disappointed I was leaving, but I think he knew that he had to let me go. It was.
Yeah, I've heard of him in the past holding it against people. He didn't hold it against you or anything.
He didn't, no. And I think maybe because I was completely upfront with him. It's like once I'd actually talked to him, I called Paul and said I've talked to him and I'm looking into the options of going. And I think, what can you do? It's like you can be mad at me for leaving, but if I'm honest and upfront about it, it's like you can't be mad at me for, I didn't do anything against your back. I didn't do anything, behind your back. And he knew why I had to leave, so he may have been hot, but he's never said that he was ever hot at me, never held it against me. We've always gotten along great.
Did WCW make any promises as far as a push goes when you were negotiating to go in there?
No, and I didn't even ask. And it was one of those things. It was a big covert thing at first. It was one of those things where I had put out feelers, a few of the people that I had known saying, if let them know that I'm interested. And I actually got an email from a 15-year-old kid from Medicine Hat, Alberta, saying this is Terry Taylor's email address. He actually responds to you if you send him an email. This is Vince Russo's. He doesn't respond to you, but these are his email addresses you might be interested in. I'm like, who the hell is this kid? And then I got another one from him, and I realized it was actually a forward from Terry Taylor. That he was like Terry's internet stooge. Anything that was going on the internet, this kid kept Terry in the loop. And it just said, from a legal standpoint, we're leery to reach out to him. If he is contractually allowed to talk to us, we'd love to hear from him. So I emailed Terry back and said that, I'm not under contract to Paul. I'm interested in talking to you. here's my number. My phone rang like an hour later. And I think it was the next morning I was on a flight to Atlanta to meet with Vince and Russo and Bischoff.
Okay. How'd that initial meeting go?
It was weird. It was one of those things too. We met at a hotel room somewhere that I guess they had this big suite booked where they did all their booking every week. And Terry booked my flight and said, yeah, you're meeting with them. A car will pick you up. Car picked me up at the airport, took me to this hotel, and I sat in this room waiting. And then Eric and Vince walked in, and I think they played basketball or something. They were all showing their sweats and stuff. Oh, yeah, be with you in a minute. And they cleaned up and we sat down and I talked with, I think Russo first. He was sort of talking creative and stuff, going, oh, this is what we're doing here. We're trying to get new guys, blah, blah, blah. And then after I talked to him for a few minutes, and he was just throwing a couple ideas out, he actually pitched the one idea, just off the top of my head, and he said, you could be Eric Bischoff's illegitimate son. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you got the same cocky, arrogant look on your face that he has. And I'm like, okay, is that really good for contract negotiations, that I have a cocky, arrogant look on my face? But I guess if it's the same one that the other guy that's going to hire me that has, maybe that is a good thing. I don't know. So then Eric and I sat down, and it was basically just we debated money and road expenses and stuff, and came to terms. Said I can live with that. He said you can live with that, and called the car that took me over to the office to meet with the head of legal, and she had the contract written up, and this is it. You want to sign it? And I said, well, I got to go home and have a lawyer look at it. Actually, it was when I first talked to them, I was under a verbal to Paul, and when they found out about it, they said, we can't talk to you because you're under a verbal. Mike Austin was under a verbal. It was a huge nightmare. Legally, we're not talking to you. But right after Mike did his jump, and Paul had a big panic meeting with everybody saying, we've got to sign everybody today. WCW's stealing all our talent. It's war. And I wouldn't sign my contract because there was still some things in it I wasn't happy with. And he said, well, I need you to sign something. Would you sign a 30-day contract? Okay. I don't care what it says. 30 days isn't going to kill anybody. Yeah. So I signed the 30-day thing. So when they said, well, we can't have you under a verbal, I'm like, well, I terminated my verbal, so it doesn't matter. And I said, well, actually, I just signed this stupid thing. I got a 30-day thing. And they're like, well, what's that? So I faxed them that. And they're like, oh, well, this supersedes anything that was verbal because it's in writing that you're bound by this time. He says, so we can do whatever you want. But in it, I couldn't sign with WCW until it expired. And it was also a big kayfabe thing in the written thing that I, had to keep completely secret and quiet that I was negotiating with anybody else because Paul didn't want word to get out and kill the possibility of our blow-off pay-per-view. So it was a big covert thing that when I actually went to the office, they actually had a lady meet me out in the rain behind the building and brought me in a fire exit, and they made sure the hall was clear so nobody office people saw me so it wouldn't leak to the internet and stuff. So I hid in the, Diana Myers, who was head of legal at the time, hid in her office and negotiated the contract. And she said, well, you can sign it now and we'll just, date it to the day after your agreement with Paul. I said, well, no, if that's what it says, I said, I'm not signing it till that day. I'll take it home with me, have my lawyer read it, and on the day that I'm clear, I'll sign it. She said, okay, that's fine. So I went back, and I think the only person I'd actually told for sure that I had signed it was Callus, Cyrus, whatever you want to call him. So when I got back to the hotel room, because I was flying out the next morning or later that night or whatever, and I had to tell somebody. So I called Callus and said, this is completely off the record, but I've negotiated a deal and I'm going. He was the only one that I told. Because according to Paul and to honor, what I had made a deal with Paul was that I wouldn't tell anybody. Even the night of the pay-per-view with Justin, my last night, it's like when PJ and I sat down to put the match together, he's like, are you leaving or not? I said, I can't say. So I didn't tell anybody until the match was over. So even, I think they sort of figured, but no one actually was officially told or knew until that match was over and I had lost to PJ in Milwaukee.
What was his reaction when he finally told him?
He was obviously really disappointed, but I think he was happy for me because it was, he knew it was a good step for me and it was, financially a good thing. So I think he was happy for me, but disappointed. Dawn Marie took it really hard. Yeah. She was bawling. Because we were really close and, obviously her character and her job was so closely tied to mine. That's one thing that I think Paul did that was really smart. Originally, our contracts were about the same time, and then he had her re-sign for a longer one, so our contracts weren't expiring at the same time. Not that I had my verbal that we were running under. We weren't coming up for negotiation at the same time at all because WCW wanted her too, and had she not actually signed a longer term thing and had she kept herself open, they would have took us both as a group. So it was like splitting up a working combination, and she really was had uncertainty with what she would do, so she was really upset.
Yeah. How about Dreamer? How did he handle it?
He was cool. Tommy's always been really cool. It's like from a business standpoint, I think he realized that good for you, you're going to make a living. You know what I mean? It's like Tommy was always, even as much of a part of ECW as he was, I think he had as much stake in the thing as Paul did. I think he, wanted guys to do what was best for them, and I think he, respected the fact that I've got to go feed my family and stuff. I think a lot of people thought it was crazy because everybody hated WCW, and why would you go there? But it was one of the things I went in with my eyes open, and I knew I wasn't going to be working main events and beating Kevin Nash anytime soon, but I knew that I'd have a good paycheck and my family would be taken care of, so I didn't care.
Yeah. Was Paul happy with the amount of time that you gave him to finish up in ECW?
We actually negotiated that when I had come to terms. I told him that, they made me an offer that I'd agreed to or come to terms with and so forth. He says, okay, well, when are you starting? How much time? And I said, how much time do you think you should give me and so forth? I said, well, how much do you want? And I told him, I said, I don't see any reason to go past the pay-per-view. I said, we've got another week or two of TV or whatever. I said, and then we've got the pay-per-view with Justin. So I put him over. What more is there for me to do? Staying around for one more pay-per-view to me didn't really make any sense. And I said, I'd like to take this deal as soon as I can. I said, so I think, and my 30-day actually expired the day before the pay-per-view. And I sort of joked with Paul, I guess you should have made this, contract for a day longer. And he's like, why? I said, it expires the day before the pay-per-view. I said, don't worry. I said, I'm not going to no-show the pay-per-view. I may have actually even signed an extension for the one day. That may have actually been the, now that I think about it, that may have been the 30-day. And then I told him I had negotiated with them or so forth, and he wanted me to sign for one more day to commit. And I said, that's fine. And I think in that one day was you can't tell anybody anything of any kind, but whatever it was, it was one of those things where I thought that was fair, and he said, okay, fine. So I think that was part of the reason why there was no heat, is I could have said, screw you, and left before the pay-per-view and not even put Justin over, and that would have been, kind of cheap.
Yeah. He didn't care about dropping the tag titles?
See, he did that before I signed.
Okay.
He did that as a precautionary thing. I was just talking with him and nothing more. And it was that night, it was actually the night that I took the kendo stick and actually was in the hospital, I think. But there was the night where he threw the tag belts down and won the heavyweight title.
Yeah.
And that he did, I think, on the assumption that I was leaving. Figure, well, this will cover my ass one way or the other. And if I did stay, then you've got the Impact Player feud, so either way. But that was done before any decision was finalized.
What was your initial reaction to the WCW locker room and the whole atmosphere in the locker room?
It was really good. And it's funny because everybody else talks about how horrible it was, but I thought it was great. And it was one of the things, too, where, again, I got lucky because I was so tight with Peach, who was tight with Nash and so forth. So it sort of gave me a friendly in, even though I had never met Nash. It was my first Nitro that I went to. Oh, hey, nice to finally meet you. Oh, hey, you're PJ's buddy, blah, 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 blah. So I sort of had an in right away. So I had the in with Kev, it was kind of nice. And then I started meeting a few other guys. I didn't know that many guys there, because all the guys that I knew had just left. But, I got fortunate that, I ran into the whole MIA group of, Bill DeMott and those guys who were in Chavo, who were super great and friendly. Hey, welcome to the thing or whatever. And Christopher Daniels was there at the time, and him and I had worked. I don't think we'd worked, but we'd been on ECW shows together. A short little run before he got heat there, and they didn't want to use him anymore. But it's like I got along great with Chris right from day one. So it's like I had somebody to talk to and hang out with, and so right from the beginning, it's like I had a good atmosphere there. And so it was a lot of fun. There was definitely the cliques and so forth. Like I didn't hang and party with Scott Steiner and Kevin Nash and all those guys, but they were still really friendly. Scotty in particular, actually, I was surprised because they had such a rep of being a hard nose and everything else. It's like Scotty was great to me. He was really nice. And I think it was one of those things, too, where I knew my place. When I went in there, I knew that, okay, I'm not going to be in the main event. I'm not going to be working with those guys. I'll take what I get. I ended up getting more than I thought I would. But I think also, too, that the fact that I wasn't politicking or complaining and trying to, I'm better than these guys or I should be up there, too, or whatever else, I think they were more calm and relaxed and accepting of me because I wasn't there fighting tooth and nail trying to take their spot. I realized that they had their spot and I wasn't going to get there, and if I had to work with them, I worked with them and was professional about it, and if I was going to be in the mid-card and they're in the main event, and that's just the way it was, and so there was no professional tension there, and everybody was really cool.
Yeah. Was it difficult from going from having like creative input in ECW to going to WCW and hearing ideas about like being Eric Bischoff's Elizabeth's son or whatever else they had planned?
It wasn't too bad, especially because for the most part, and I think this is one of the things that really helped Jericho when he was there, the fact that you weren't part of the the main event important guys, you didn't get creative freedom on the angles, but you had complete creative freedom on your actual matches. This is one of those things that I don't think, I was in a spot where for the most part I slid under the radar a little bit, but also too, right from when I started, the first little bit was, completely silly. The first few things we did when Kidman and I were tagging, it's like, I think the angle behind it was, ridiculous. We actually blew off our tag team feud in one show. He turned on me at like seg 3 and we did the blow off match seg 7. Kidman and I joked it was the shortest angle feud in the history of the business. It was 4 segments on a show. But it was like once I started getting the heel push with the whole Team Canada thing, it's like Johnny Ace was my agent throughout it all. And he and I hit it off right away, so that I felt like I had some degree of creative input, because I was, he was my agent on all that stuff and we were talking about it, so forth. So I felt like I was really involved in doing more, because Johnny was actually the guy that I had talked to when I thought I had the All Japan gig with Candido after Smokey ended. So I had a few, half a dozen conversations with him on the phone back then. And it was the second Nitro I'd gone to, the first one I was going to work. And we were connecting through Denver, and at the connection in Denver, Johnny Ace was there. I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? He said, I'm just, home from Japan and just coming to check out the show and sort of see, what's what in the U.S. scene. I figured I'd take a look. I'm like, oh, okay, well, nice to finally meet you. Or else chatted for a little bit. And that was the segment that I did the run-in on the 3 count. And Johnny said, yeah, I'm your agent on this thing. Where are we going to shoot it and how we're going to do it? I'm like, really? You were just showing to check things out. Now you're my agent? He's, well, I was just seeing what happens. I'm like, okay, I guess he was kayfabing me, but... so it was one of those things, too, where, I think he realized that, he was going to... As an agent, you're sort of a slave to your match, too, where if your match doesn't go well, you as an agent looks bad. So I think, he was just coming in and wanted to make an impression, and knew that, his All Japan finishes and stuff were really long and complicated stuff. He's a really good finish guy. I really like Johnny as an agent. He knew he had to impress, and I think he realized that I could do it. So he sort of latched on to me, and we both ended up benefiting from it, because I ended up getting a great agent with long finishes that was pushing to give me more minutes in my matches and have better matches. And then he ended up looking good, because he was taking this, kid that just showed up, and he's, red hot having good matches. So we both ended up benefiting off each other. And because of that, we hit it off right away, and I got to have a degree of, input a little bit. How do you want to do this? Oh, let's do it this way and stuff. So I had a bit, which was cool. When the end of the whole, the major push thing sort of died off a little bit, it started getting a little, sillier creatively. But at that point in time, you just sort of have to shut down that part of your brain and just go, okay, this is my lot for right now, and look at it as a job, and at least everything else is going well, and try to have the best match you can. So it wasn't too bad. I got a little bit of input. It wasn't as much, but.
Did going a few years ahead, did Johnny Ace ever try to push you more in WWE? Or use his office power there anymore?
I have no idea. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where when I first got in WWE, I was, given a fair bit, and Johnny, treated me really well. And then when, the creative end of it was really falling off the deep end with where I was going and stuff, everyone kept telling me that they were pulling for me, that they needed to do more. They just, we just got to think of the right thing. It's like, we love what you're doing. We need to do more. And, everybody from, Sean, Hunter, the agents to Vince himself. It's like, oh, we got to find something for you. It's like, you're capable of so much more, but they never found anything. So it's like, whether they were all just saying that and going, screw him in the meetings, I have no idea. But Johnny always appeared to have my back, and I was never shown otherwise that he didn't. But, obviously he either, didn't pull hard enough or didn't have enough pull, because I didn't get a whole lot after the first few runs. Like, don't get me wrong, a lot of people think, oh, he was just a dancing idiot with the big penis. In WWE, they wasted him completely. But I had, 3 years of some pretty good stuff. And whether that was Johnny's doing or not, I don't know.
Okay. Going back to the beginning of WCW, what did you think of Vince Russo's style of writing? And how was he to deal with?
I didn't deal that much with him, but I don't know 100% what all was his ideas and what was done, but from what I understand it's like I completely disagree with pretty much everything that he did. He was very much, it's all storyline, it's no wrestling. At one point in time I was even told that he had said he was going to fire all the boys and just hire actors and teach them how to wrestle. I'm like, ooh, that'd be good. Yet for some reason he never even contemplated the thought, and I thought this would have been smart. But no one ever thought, if it's that important, why aren't you sending these guys to acting lessons? I think it would be a lot smarter to send the boys who know how to work to an acting class once a week, instead of trying to hire a bunch of actors that aren't even in shape. But it never even occurred to them, and they had enough guys. There's some guys that, off for 4 months with a torn something. It's like, why aren't you're still paying these guys, why not send them to an acting class for 4 months? Why no one in the business has ever done that, I have no idea. the boys who decide they're going to get into movies because they want to do movies, oh, I'll take some acting classes. It's like, well, why hasn't the office, when guys are off, making them do that? If, if the promos and stuff are so important. Who was it? It was one guy. Might have been Spanky. I'm not even sure. It was Paul London. There was one point where they wanted them to move to one of the developmental territories or whatever else, and it's like he wanted to stay where he was because he was taking acting lessons. I think it was London. I could be wrong. And I don't know if this was when I was in Louisville training or whatever else. And it's like, I'm like, why wouldn't the office be happy with that? It's like, I would like to think that they're happy with his technical work. You know what I mean? It's like, obviously, he either needs to get a lot bigger or have more personality for them to love him. So it's like, you think that he's taking acting classes would be more of a benefit than having him out take some more bumps. God, the guy knows how to take a bump. And it's like, why they didn't, when guys are injured or anything else, make them take acting lessons. Or hell, you're sitting at TV for 100 hours every Monday and Tuesday with your thumb up your nose, killing time. It's like, hell, you could have an acting coach run a 2-hour seminar in the afternoon. Help boys with their promos. But back to Vince Russo, because I tend to get sidetracked. It's like, he just seems all storyline and no match. And I was even told at one point in time when I got hired, they're like, well, what can I do with this guy? It's like, he can wrestle, but he's got nothing else. And I was told, again, secondhand, so maybe not, that he didn't think there was anything he could do with me. And and he did the one match with Flair, and he come back from it. This stuff isn't that hard. It's like, well, you're in there with someone that's one of the greatest at carrying stiffs. You know what I mean? Go up there with Stevie Ray and go 45 minutes and tell me it's easy. But so he was just, and the two dealings I had with him was that first meeting where he thought, oh, it'd be Eric Bischoff's illegitimate kid, great. And then there was they first started doing the Team Canada, we decided we were going to have the Jacques Rougeau and Carl Lett, we were actually going to be a group. He came to me and said that we were going to be the Canadian World Organization. He says it's like the playoff, the NWO thing, but he says because you're a heel, you didn't know that it's supposed to be Canadian World Order, you got it wrong. And I'm sitting there going, he's like, how big of a moron would I have to be that I'm in the wrestling business and I don't know that the biggest, hottest angle ever come down WCW's way was World Order and I got it wrong? It's like, where is this going to draw money that I'm just so stupid I don't know what the new World Order was? And I actually, it was 20 minutes or so we debated and argued, and I'm like, Canada's national hockey team is Team Canada. Canada's, especially Americans, Canada's hockey and snow. It's like, why can't we just be Team Canada? We can wear hockey jerseys, and he said, oh yeah, but merchandise-wise, we can do the CWO thing, and I'm like, I would rather go with the Team Canada, and stood my ground, and he said, okay, thankfully, so he was open to it at least. And of course, they didn't bother even trying to do any Canadian merchandise, so it's not like it would have mattered if the Canadian World Organization could have worked. It was just, and a lot of that, because Disco was doing a lot of booking at that time too. And I found both Disco and Vince were very big on, it all has to be funny. And it's like, we're not booking a sitcom. Everything doesn't have to be funny. Well, this will be funny. It's like, how about this will be good or this will draw money? But it was always, oh, this will be funny. And it's like, you can have some entertaining stuff in your show, but your finishes should be, oh, that's funny. Especially because, how do your heels have any heat if it's just, oh, this is funny? It's like that New Blood Rising pay-per-view in Vancouver, where I got beaten like 47 times in Canada in one match. that was Disco's idea. He said, oh, it'll be great, it'll be hilarious. Why is it supposed to be hilarious? You know what I mean? And it's like, that was probably the single most dreadful day of my life. And it wasn't because I was a mark and, oh man, I got to do a job 4 times. If we'd done it in the States, I would have been all for it. But you took us to Vancouver for this show. Actually drew a pretty good house, especially because WCW wasn't exactly drawing, buckets at that point in time. Billing me as this hero, coming home to Canada for the first time since I broke in on a major show, with 3 title belts with Canadian flags on them, and we're going to beat them 4 times in one match in a comedy gimmick. And I felt so bad for the fans, because it's like, I honestly think probably it's probably the show out of any other that I've been on that I actually probably drew more of the house than any other show I was on. Like, I was a big part of that show. And to just completely crap on the fans and disappoint them, it just ate at me. It's like, oh, this is going to be terrible. And even Brett pulled me aside, because Brett did the thing at the end. He pulled me aside, he says, no offense, but you realize this crowd could turn on you. And I said, yeah. I said, I think that's what you're here for. I think they figure that no matter how bad they crap on me in this match, if Bret Hart comes out and endorses me, the Canadians will forgive me. And it's one of those things where they just didn't get, okay, we're in Canada, you can't just do it the same as you would elsewhere. And it was like, oh, this will be funny. It's like, funny? And the thing that really peed me off was the fact that they sacrificed me to get Mike over. Okay, fine. They turned Mike into the 70s guy like a week later. So if you're going to repackage him and turn him into a joke, what was the point of sacrificing a really hot heel to get him over? Had we had that match, and if they had just left us alone and didn't book the 14 finishes in the 10 minutes we had, Mike and I could have had a really good match. I could have went over strong and clean in the middle of the ring. I would have been a god in Canada. Brett comes out and gives me a big hug. What more, what better endorsement could you have? And again, it just would have been a whole nother level. I would have been a legit main event draw in Canada. Huge, stronger in the company. And then, so what? We jobbed Mike up. You're turning into the 70s guy in 2 weeks. It's not going to matter. So it's like you sacrificed me to get nothing for Mike. And Mike and I talked about it afterwards, and Mike was completely in agreement.
Yeah.
He's like, it'd be different if we did it in the States. I screwed him over with the Canadian rule book, kept the title but screwed him over, had another match back and he had won, then great. You sacrificed me to get Mike over. Perfect. But you sacrificed me to job Mike out in 2 weeks. It was a complete waste. And the crowd was so disappointed. I couldn't believe they didn't turn.
Yeah. Looking at the when you first entered WCW, were you surprised when you got all those titles right off the bat?
It's funny, everybody asked me that, and I certainly didn't expect it, but it just sort of happened so all of a sudden that I never really thought about it. It was one of those things where, there was a little bit of talk of, the U.S. title, and then, I don't even know whose idea the Canadian thing was. It was just one of those things where I had the idea, I think everybody else did, this would be really good heat, make it the Canadian title. So when the tournament came around, I sort of didn't expect it, but it was, cool, they're actually going to give me the strap, great. And then the next week, the hardcore thing happened so quick and so fast. It was like, oh wow, I've got 2 of them. And I was like, wow, I've got 3 of them. It's like, wow. And I was so busy in doing it that I never really thought about it. And even like the hardcore title, I think that decision was made the day of the show. Because originally I was told, I was told by Vito, because he was tight with Russo. So he was one of those guys that was really proactive in his career as far as, I think he talked to Russo like every day, what am I doing? And he was told that we'd have a U.S. title match on the one show, I'd go over, and then we'd have a hardcore title on the other show, he'd go over. And then the day of the show we get there and he's told, no, you're going to do the job on both shows. Actually, no, maybe he'd already done the job on the Nitro, and then when we got there on Thunder, the decision was, couldn't have been, because I actually won it on Nitro. Anyway, he was told that we're going to trade finishes 1 each. And then he was told, no, we're going to put Lance over in both matches, he's going to win both titles. And he was irate. He actually was complaining to Terry Taylor about the finish in an elevator with just the 3 of us in it. I'm like, you realize I'm standing here when you're going, what, I was promised, why do I got to do the job to him? It's like, right here. But he was really upset about it. And so it was one of those things where maybe I was so tied up in the absurdity of him, really fighting, doing a job for the belt, that I was sort of like, well, it's kind of bizarre, that I never really thought about it. And then the following week, Jericho's wedding was on the Sunday. And actually, I used to joke too, because when Jericho invited me to the wedding, I'm like, I've only been in the company like 3 weeks, I can't ask for time off. I was afraid to ask for time off. So Jericho called and got me booked the time off. I'm like, man, you got more stroke, you don't even work here anymore. But he had called whoever was, in charge of booking house shows and stuff and got me taken off the house show loop so I could do his wedding. So we did the wedding Sunday night, stayed up all night, caught a flight in the morning and flew to Nitro. Find out that I'm beating Chavo for the Cruiserweight. And this is a great story. Chavo goes to me, he says, man, you won't believe this. I said, what? He says, I was in catering. He said, and Vito comes up to me. He says, man, I feel bad for you. It's like the Last Supper, isn't it? And Chavo, no sleep. He's like, what are you talking about? Oh, so it's your last meal with the title. I was like, what? He said, oh man, I was in the same boat last week, man. It's like the Last Supper, you got to give up that title. It really sucks. And Chavo's like, it's wrestling. He says, someone had to give it up for me to be champ. I give it up till it's, because Chavo had been around the business forever. He didn't care. Yeah. He knows what's what. And Vito was so, distraught over having to drop the title that he thought, Chavo would be in tears in the back crying about it too. And, here's Chavo and I on no sleep whatsoever, straight from Chris's wedding to the plane to the arena, and went out and had the match. And it's like, we actually had a pretty good match, especially considering neither one of us had slept in 2 days. But it was just hilarious. Man, it's like the Last Supper. And it ended up being like this running joke for years where Chavo and I, whenever someone's dropping the title, say, oh, it's like the Last Supper. But and it was one of those things where I never, maybe it's bad, because I never took title runs serious. It's like when I first won the tag titles in ECW, the boys goes, oh, congratulations. I thought they were ribbing. Because it's not like I actually beat anybody. But they were serious because they viewed ECW as, we all work hard and you actually have to deserve the title to get it and so forth. So they were actually being genuine. And I even pulled PJ and Jerry aside, I'm like, are these kids ribbing me? like, I didn't really win this. And they were like, oh, congratulations and stuff. So even with, with Vito being, really despondent that he loses the title and stuff, it was always just, they just decided I'm getting it this week. I never actually, took pride in having a title. I took pride in having good matches. And I guess there's some degree of pride in the fact that, obviously someone feels that you're capable enough to do it. But, it's like there's a lot of guys that have held titles that I don't think could lace my boots. So it's like I never put stock in, wow, I've got 3 titles, I'm great. And the guys in the locker room, Bubba and Booker do this all the time. I think Bubba might be working a little bit, but they'll debate over who's the best tag team and stuff, and they'll start listing off the tag titles that they've held. Yeah. I'm like, you guys realize this is all just made up, right? And it's like, oh, we beat these guys, and we did that. I'm like, what? It's like, it doesn't really count. But maybe I'm different, because it's like a lot of guys, titles mean a lot to them, and the push means a lot to them, but it's like winning and losing in titles never meant as much. It's like I wanted to obviously be up the card, so I'm, involved in something that's meaningful creatively, but as far as actually having a belt or not having a belt, I never put a whole lot of stock into it. So the fact that I had 3 titles and stuff, I never really sunk in that, wow, they're pushing you hard, you've got these 3 titles and stuff. It was, oh, this is my lot this week, and this is who I work. And I even joked with Sting at one time. He was like, man, they put a lot of, stock in you. I said, yeah. I said, I thought it was a push at first, and I realized it was a rib. I said, my carry-on bag weighs 85 pounds. It's like one of those things where it's like when they told me I was getting rid of the belts, I'm like, great, my bag's going to be lighter.
Now, you won all the belts, and then they did the thing with Nash where he laid you out. Were you frustrated like there's a glass ceiling, or was that kind of something that you thought to just keep you down and make sure that you stayed in the mid-card even if you had momentum?
It bothered me because I thought it was horrible business, but I saw it coming and knew what it was. It was one of those things where, it's like I won the U.S. title, the hardcore title, the cruiserweight title. I actually had a world title shot the following week. And actually, we did the false finish with the half crowd, and the crowd bought it. And it's one of those things where even more so than winning any titles, it's like, to me, that moment really meant a lot to me. It was one of those things where there was 5 seconds in that match where the crowd legitimately thought I was going to be the world champion. And they believed it. So the fact that they believed it meant as much to me as actually getting the thing, because, I thought I sucked up to the right guy, maybe I could have got it, but it's like, that wouldn't mean anything to me. And the guys, like Benoit's big that way, it's like he won't politic at all. Because it's like, even if he thinks he deserves a belt, he doesn't want it for politicking, he wants it because he deserves it. And so I give him all the credit in the world. It's like the fact that he actually got the big one without politicking to get it's amazing. And I think, him more than a lot of other guys can really take pride in that. Because he didn't, and everybody politics, it's one of those things where everybody pleads their own case. But it's like a guy like Benoit never does. And the fact that he got it, I think his means more than anybody else's. And I didn't politic for any of it, and the crowd bought it. They believed in me enough. Granted, it was because of the push, but the crowd, accepted the fact that I actually could have won the world title, so it meant a lot. So I accomplished that, and was actually, all the reviews and everything else, this is something actually done right in WCW, and, we really can get behind this guy. They've got a new hot character that's, something worth watching on TV, which meant a lot to me. And then I got to the show, and it's like, oh yeah, you do your match, you go over, and then stay in the ring, and Kevin's going to come out, and at first he was going to, get up in his face, and he's going to powerbomb you. And I'm just sitting there going, this is the dumbest thing in the history of the world. It's like, it's one of those things where he walked to the ring this over, and left the ring this over. I walked to the ring this over, and left this over. So it's like, the only thing this segment accomplished was burying me. It didn't have an upside. It's like the Mike Awesome thing. If it was to get Mike to a new level and push him somewhere else, great, job the shit out of me, if that's the way you decide to go. But to job me to then job him later was dumb. And this was jobbing me for no reason whatsoever. And it was one of those things where had I just finished that segment, rolled out of the ring and left, and then Nash's music hit and he came to the ring, he'd be the exact same. So, and I guarantee you it was, he's getting a lot of good press, he's catching fire, he's doing really well. Let's make sure everybody knows he's not in our league. And so it's one of those things too, it's like even just to, go out and get up in his face. I said, well, I go out and get in his chest, the guy's a foot taller than me. And I think that was too, it's like they wanted that visual, it's like, okay, he's just this little shit, he doesn't matter. And it didn't end up getting changed, I just took the big boot. And it was just one of those things that it served no purpose. And I think things like that were the epitome on why WCW died. It's like, instead of going, wow, we actually get somebody that's hot and new and fresh that we can do something with. Even if you weren't going to put me with those guys and leave me out of their league, at least you could have had me being a meaningful part of the middle card. But it was one of those things that we just want to squash him and make sure everybody realizes he's not in our league. And it served no purpose to help Kev whatsoever.
Yeah. Was it tough, having to deal with that kind of stuff? Did that kind of kill your passion for the business or anything?
Not really, because I knew it going in, because because Jericho and Benoit and Eddie and Dean, all those guys had been there before, so I knew it was going to be there at some point. And when I went to WCW, I made the decision that I had to check my passion at the door for the sake of my family. And when I had the time to go out there with a Kidman and really tear it up, or go out there with Ray and really have fun, I could have the passion and love it. And then the rest of the time, it was a business decision. I was going to work. And so those are the times that I'm like, man, this is really dumb. And I'm like, okay, well, at least, I can afford to pay my rent and pay my mortgage. And I looked at it as a business plan. And I checked my passion at the door, which sounds really shitty, but when I accepted the job, and really I only had to check it a lot small. I didn't have to check it as often as I thought I would. It's like I expected to, when I signed the deal, I expected to flush the passion down the toilet, and I really just had to lock it up a couple days a month. Because it was fortunate enough that for the most part I was left alone, and I was working with Kidman and Ray and Hoovy and Bill and Conan and those guys that were a lot of fun. And for the most part, it's like, okay, I've got a pay-per-view with Kidman, I've got 15 minutes. And we weren't important enough for them to care, so yeah, you have 15 minutes, go do what you want. Great, I can go work with Kidman for 15 minutes on pay-per-view, I can do what I want. So that's when you take the passion out and you have fun and you bust your ass and you have a match you can be proud of. And it's like, okay, you're doing this segment where you get kicked in the face by Kevin Nash for no reason whatsoever, or go out and do it. It's like, okay, well, leave my passion in my suitcase and go out and do my job and support my family. So there was good days and bad days, but I went in expecting a lot more bad days than I got. So I was really happy.
Okay. Going towards the end of WCW, when could you tell that it was a sinking ship?
I don't think anybody thought it was a sinking ship. I think obviously they knew there was no rudder on the boat for a long period of time, but I think everybody figured it'd be there forever. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, the ship's got 50 million holes and it's taking on water, but it's got Ted Turner's life preserver on it. So I don't think anybody thought the thing would sink. And then it came up that it was okay, it's going to be bought. But we actually had a big meeting at one point in time where Eric Bischoff showed up, and me and my Fusion group has bought WCW, because Eric went away for a while, wasn't part of the company, and then he came back and said, I bought the company, and we've come to terms where I will book it in the interim until the transfer takes over, and I am now your boss. And I'm booking the show. And even I think there was one of the vice president Blair Turner guys who said, yeah, Eric Bischoff is now running the show. He's we've come to terms, he's buying the company. So we're like, okay, great, Fusion's now buying the company, we're going off and running. And he was actually running the show. They had changed the booking direction, and he was now booking the show. And then we start hearing that the deal's not finalized, and the guy from AOL is gonna, doesn't want wrestling on the damn network. He's gonna dump the whole thing. And so Vince McMahon's back in the picture. He's gonna buy it. We're like, what? We already had our meeting where we were told he's now buying the company. So we really didn't know what was going on. We figured, okay, I guess Eric probably still running that, or what's gonna happen. And I think even the day of the last Nitro, nobody knew for sure. Internet rumors were, Vince has actually bought it, but so what? The internet said Vince bought it. We actually had Eric standing in the room with the Turner guy going, he bought it, he's your new boss. So it's like we had got pretty confirmation that this is what's going to happen, and then it didn't happen. So the fact that the internet says Vince is going to be here, okay, maybe. So we really had, at least I didn't, I don't think anybody knew for sure what the hell was going on until we got to that last Nitro, and Shane and Pat and Jerry and stuff walked in and said, hi, we're your new bosses, we've bought it, the deal's done. Holy shit, this has actually happened now. So we had a big meeting, and they said, everybody just go out there and do your thing, we're not going to change the course booking wise or what's going to go on, and that was it. And I was like, wow, I guess this is for real.
So the last Nitro you guys came in, you saw Shane McMahon there, and he had a meeting with you guys?
Yeah, we came in, and I think someone had saw, I don't know if it was some WB trucks or something, but I think something there was, saw something with a WB logo on it, says, holy shit, I guess this has really happened. And so we're all, everybody's got their little clicks, they're all saying, what the hell's going on, what's going to happen? So, we're having a big meeting, and, rumors got out that, Shane and these guys were here. It's like, so we had everybody in there waiting for a big meeting, and then they walked in and said, hi, we're your new bosses. And they did a real good, positive talk about everyone will be given an opportunity, and this is not any animosity in the past is going to be there, whether you're good, bad, or otherwise, everyone will be given a chance. If you can step up and answer the call, you'll have a job. We look forward to working with you. And so it was a very positive meeting and supportive on their part. And I was a little disappointed because I was all but positive that Mike and I were going to be given the tag team titles that night, because we'd been working with Palumbo and O'Hare, and they decided they weren't going to change any directions. They were just going to leave it where it was. As much as I just talked about the fact that titles, it just sort of would have been one more in WCW that I had. which would have been sort of neat from a history standpoint, especially because then I would have had the ECW, WCW, and WWE tag titles. But they kiboshed that the last day night because they didn't want title changes and stuff, clogging up the fact that there was the big simulcast thing and Shane was buying it and everything else. It was a cool night.
Yeah. Was there a lot of anxiety of going into that Nitro or with all the rumors and everything about your future?
I think it was for a lot of guys. I didn't have it. I think because I had, when the rumors were flying, I sort of reached out to everybody I could, and I was getting feedback that there's their top 10 list of guys they want to keep, and I was on it. And because I had Jericho on the inside and a few other guys from the WWE end that have basically said that word on me was good, that they definitely had interest in me, that I had a good rep as being a not only a good hand but a good performer and no headaches and so forth. That I was given enough information to believe that if WWE was buying it, I had a job, so I wasn't too worried about it. I think at that point in time I was fairly confident that I had something to offer, so I didn't sweat it too much. I would have preferred, even at the time and in hindsight, I would have preferred that, obviously WCW stayed the course it was, because I had a really good financial setup, and I got to the point where I was, tight with everybody down to the guys that strung cable to, the head of the office department. Like I was, really tight with everybody. So I honestly thought before the buyout happened that I was going to be in WCW for life. That I would, put in another 5 or 8 years and retire and be happy.
What was Eric Bischoff like at the end?
It was one of those things where he wasn't really around at the end, at least from where I stood. Because I didn't have a lot of dealings with Eric, but Eric was always really cool with me. I got along with him, and I for some reason felt like he liked me. And it was one of those things where it was, I'm taking over, I bought the company, it's going to be great and everything else. And then I think when that deal fell through, he quit showing up, or at least quit spending time with me at it. So it's like one of those things where it went from, hi, I'm your boss, to, gee, what happened to Eric? Vince is here now. So I never really saw Eric afterwards. I would imagine he was pretty upset about the whole thing falling through, because he had put a lot of work into taking it. I think WCW meant a lot to him, so the fact that he got kiboshed and stolen up from under him because the TV deal fell through, I think he was probably pretty out about it.
What was it like at the end of that last Nitro? What was it like in the locker room once it was all over?
It was weird. It was very somber. It was one of the things that guys were kind of excited that they're going to go to WWE and everything else, but it was so up in the air that no one knew for sure whether they were going to get an own TV deal and keep WCW separate or what was going on. It was really sort of a weird thing. It was like graduation, where it's like, you're graduating from high school and you're going away for summer, you don't know if you're going to see your friends again type of thing. Like, it was really sort of that closing party moment and stuff. It's like everyone was sort of doing their own thing. And then there was, obviously a lot of guys that, were in Panama City Beach spring break, that they just want to go hit the bars and pick up chicks. But it's like, I was really weird. Like, I finished my match and then I watched the Flair Sting match and stuff, and I just sort of sat there in my tights. And it's like, I can't believe, WCW was such a big thing, and even it was sort of that one moment that we really got to accept the fact that WWE bought us, because up until that afternoon we didn't know for sure. So at that point in time it was really sinking into me. It's like, wow, this is really the end of something. And I think a lot of people sort of had that, man, this is really it. And there's a lot of guys took pictures and stuff, because it was really sort of, we don't know if we're going to see each other again, going away for summer vacation, or are we? We don't know. And it was one of those things where I just kept sitting there going, oh, this is really weird, and sort of reflecting on the whole history of the business and WCW coming to an end. And I wasn't consciously doing it, but it was, it was getting to be really late. I don't know, it was 12, 1, whatever it was. I'm still sitting in my tights. Most of the guys are gone. There's like 1 or 2 people still straggling left. The camera guys are pulling the cables out and everything else. And Paige walks in, he's all changed. He's like, oh, he says, you're going to steal my gimmick and be the last one, are you? I sort of, oh, I guess so. He's like, well, I'll let you have it. And he walks out. And then I realized, oh, shit, I'm the last guy to leave. So I was the last guy to leave the locker room on the last WCW show ever, which is kind of neat. And then I ended up being the first guy to do the WCW WWE Invasion thing. So it's like I got to be the sort of the closing chapter on one and the starting chapter on another.
Well, your first night in WWE, what was that like?
It was cool and weird all at the same time. Because it was a real surprise. Because we'd all dealt with Johnny as the go-between, any of the contract things and the buyout things. It's like Johnny was our go-between. He was sort of the official head of WCW talent relations, because they were originally going to keep them all separate. So everything I did, I went through Johnny. And he said, we're flying all the WCW guys down to Stamford to meet with the office and negotiate their new deals and stuff. But he said, we're doing a TV up in Calgary in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was. He says, there's no point in flying down to Connecticut. You can just meet with JR when you're at the show, so be sure to come to the TV taping in Calgary. I'm like, okay. And, being the well-trained, well-prepared guy that I am, it's like, well, you always have your gear. So I had my gear in the trunk of my car just in case. Didn't actually figure on using it. It's just one of those unwritten rules. You always have your gear. And so I showed up to the show, and it was one of those things where it was going to be cool too, because there was a lot of guys I hadn't seen in a while, from Justin to whoever. Actually, I think I met them at the airport just because they were getting in that night. I just wanted to go up and see Paige. Actually, Paige might have even stayed at my house, I don't remember, but I showed up and met with a lot of the guys and saw them. And I got to the show, and it was one of those things where I'm going there to meet JR, and I better mind my P's and Q's, say hi to everybody, and try not to be the quiet guy that's going to get heat for being arrogant or whatever else. So I get there and I walk in, and as soon as I walk in, there's JR standing there talking to Brian Christopher. Okay, well, I can't just walk by JR, he's the guy I'm here to meet, so I want to go up and meet him. And it's always that awkward moment of, well, I don't interrupt him. But if you don't say hi to him, it's like, oh, the guy's got his head up his ass, it's one of those, you can't win one way or the other. So I walk up hoping he'll stop his conversation, oh, hey, nice to meet you, or whatever else. He's sort of having his conversation. Finally, he sort of turns to me and real sort of rough and sort of, yeah, hi, I'll talk to you later. I'm like, okay. I'm like, wow, he was pretty rude and kind of unfriendly. I'm like, nice guy. I realized that was when Brian Christopher got busted at the airport for drug possession. He was firing Brian Christopher. So here I walk in on him firing Brian Christopher for getting busted at the border. And he was one of those things where he was firing him and they were deporting him and sending him right back out on a flight later that day. And that's the conversation I walked in on. I'm like, well, I guess that explains JR's mood. And actually, when I ended up talking to him later that night, he was very pleasant. I'm like, oh, really great to meet you, and talked about, plans and future and stuff. I'm like, oh, cool. And then, I don't know if it was Johnny or somebody comes, oh, you got your gear, right? And I thought he was just ribbing. I'm like, well, of course. Oh, yeah, because you're doing something tonight. I'm like, oh, great. And then someone else comes in and was like, you're ribbing, right? He's like, no, you're actually doing something tonight. I'm like, really? And so that's when they told me about the whole run-in thing and the first invader and so forth. There's one of those things, too, that I was a little stressed out about it at first, because it's one of those things where, they're like, oh, it's your hometown, you're Joe Cannon and everything else, but it's like, I'm running into it so quick, I'm like, are they going to have a chance to really realize who it is and actually pop? Because if they don't, here's my WWE debut in my hometown and the crowd just does nothing, I'm like, oh man, this is a do or die moment. It's like, God, I hope the crowd recognizes me and cares. So it's like I ended up doing a quick little run in and the crowd reacted really good, and it was pretty cool. And it was one of those things where, it's one of those, it ended up being, not a particularly big angle, but it could have been, the whole WCW invasion could have been, the biggest angle in the history of the business had it been done differently. That, it could have been that one moment in history. It's sort of like Jericho has that, he's the first unified champion ever. It's like it can never be taken away from you. It's sort of that one little claim to fame in the history books, and it's like, had the WCW thing been bigger, but at the time I was like, man, this might be pretty cool that I'm actually the first guy to do it. But the invasion thing ended up being a flash in the pan that didn't go very far, so it wasn't like I was a big part of history, but at the time it was pretty cool.
How were the WWE guys in the locker room with you coming in and with the WCW guys coming in? Was there any kind of rivalry, or maybe they were apprehensive of their spots?
There was tension, but I got really lucky. It's one of those things where almost everybody, when they first come to WWE, it's like it's a hard spot to be in. It's one of those things where if you talk too much, you've got a big head. If you don't talk enough, this is what you can't please everybody, and then you're going to get heat because everybody's looking for it to a certain extent. I got really lucky because I was tight with Jericho, with Paige, with Edge, Christian stuff. So it was like a half a dozen guys that I knew, and even Bradshaw I worked with in Europe in '95 with Otto Vaughn, so I'd known him. So I was going in knowing a few guys, so I kind of slid in under the radar a little bit that way. And then there was so many guys coming in that Buff had so much heat I didn't have to worry about it. Like there was just other guys that jumped off the radar and had all the heat seekers pile on them that I really skidded in and never had the tension, never had the heat, never had the thing. As I slid right under the radar, there was guys that whose work was really lazy from WCW, and I was able to work the WWE style right away, and I had friends already, so I didn't have as much heat and tension right away. And then Buff had so much heat that nobody else could get any if they tried. That I really, probably in the history of WWE, had one of the easiest transitions in joining the company that anybody ever did, because I managed to come in under the radar. Because anybody, when you come in by yourself, everybody's got their backup, because especially with WWE's pay system of where you are on the card, you make more money. As soon as someone comes in, everybody's going to be, worrying. The takers and the awesomes don't have to worry, obviously, so they don't have, they're certainly more friendly than the other guys, because what do they have to worry about? But it's the guys that are in those other spots where, there's 10 spots on pay-per-view, and they're one of the guys that are in at 10 or, 9 or 10. Where if this guy gets a push, I get bumped off the pay-per-view, all of a sudden I get a huge pay cut. So there's obviously going to be tension when anybody joins. But with all of us joining at once, I managed to slide in under the radar and really got lucky and avoided it.
Okay. Were you surprised that you got the Intercontinental title so quickly?
Yes and no. It's like no, because, and again, I didn't put as much stock into it as I would have liked to have been able to. because I was always a big mark for the Randy Savages and the Rick Steamboats and the IC title when I was a fan. Because it was really, you know, the workers' title, and it was like Hogan and the big guys did that, and then this was the real, you know, bust your hump, good worker kind of title. So it was sort of, you know, I would have liked to have had it mean more to me, but it didn't, because it was one of those things where I felt like it's like, okay, they've got this invasion thing, they need to give it some credibility, somebody needs to, you know, win a title or do something, and I really felt like they wanted to put a title on an invasion guy, and I was the only guy that wasn't screwing up. Because, you know, there was, you know, the guys like Page who wasn't adapting as well to the bump and feed style of WWE. There was, you know, Mike Austin wasn't blending in as well because he wasn't used to taking all the bumps because he's used to being a big guy, but now Taker and Kane are bigger than him. And so there's a lot of guys who are having a hard time adjusting, and then, you know, Buff had all the heat in the world and everything else, that I didn't feel like it was like, Lance is great, we need to push him. It was, we need to get a title on a damn WCW guy, and he's the only guy that's not, you know, blowing it. You know, not the only guy, I don't want to bury everybody, but it was everybody had a certain degree of heat or something else, and I was sort of, I think, you know, the lesser of a dozen evils, more so than we really want to push and get behind Lance Storm. And the fact that it was, you know, one of those things where there was like, you know, 4 guys involved in me winning the title and everything else, and I didn't feel like it was, you know, we love Lance Storm and want to give him the Intercontinental title because he deserves it. I felt like it was, we need to salvage this, you know, invasion thing, and he's, you know, the best choice we have, so I didn't take a whole lot of pride in the big win. I really enjoyed the angle with that Edge to lose it. I felt, you know, I was really happy with the way that went in the matches and stuff, so at least I took pride in that. But the actual winning the belt, I didn't take a whole lot of pride in.
When the whole invasion angle started, did all like the WCW and ECW guys think, okay, this is going to be huge business for all of us?
I think some of the WCW guys did. I think it was one of those things where I sensed right off the bat with the WCW thing that we weren't going, it wasn't going to be that big. I think because we didn't get enough of the big team players and stuff, and it was one of those things where it just started feeling to me that it was, you know, Shane versus Vince and just a whole bunch of other guys in between. And then when they moved Austin over to the head of the WCW thing, it's like, to me, it lost any WCW feel it had, and it just started being, you know, WWE versus WWE. But there's some guys that used to work with WCW. And I think the one night to me, it was the best invasion angle part they did when they did the thing with the ECW guys. There was that one moment where they did the turn
in Atlanta.
I don't know where it was. It could have been that. Where it was like there's the WCW group, and then the WWE guys ran in, and it ended up being it was ECW guys that were in WCW, like me and Mike, and it was the Dudleys and Taz and those guys that were WWE guys that were from ECW. Where we all did that one turn, that one moment. It was one of those holy shit moments when fans were watching. It's like at that moment, it's like, man, this was a moment. This was booked right. This was actually something. And you know and Paul come out and did that one promo. It was like really hot and everything else. And it's like, man, I think there was a lot of guys that said this could really work, this could be big, this could be, you know, the whole ECW invasion thing is working the way WCW didn't. And then we did the thing at the closing segment was when the ECW and the WCW groups united and became the alliance. It was one of those things where, because the ECW guys came out of the crowd, so we had to go to the back and ride an elevator up to the back and we were going to do the thing. And I was in the elevator with Paul and, you know, PG or else, but I was standing right beside Paul. And he was all excited because, you know, the ECW thing was working. You could tell it was, you know, stroking his ego that, you know, we've got the heat. And I said to him, you realize this is all going to get flushed down the toilet as soon as we join WCW? He said, yeah, I know. And it's like, I even knew it before we did it. The WCW thing, and it was just because the WCW thing was like, you know, Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Hare, Sean Stasiak, and it's like, you think WCW, those aren't the names that come to mind right away. It was like a bunch of green guys out of the power plant with, you know, 1 or 2 names. You know what I mean? Had they been able to get, you know, the NWO guys and Eric Bischoff and Ric Flair and all those guys at once. But unfortunately, it was, you know, the mid-card, then we got Scotty, then we got the NWO, then we got Flair. It's like you never got it all at once. And it was like the WCW thing wasn't working. And it's like the ECW thing caught on and had something. And I said to Paul, I said, as soon as we join them, it's going to bring us down a notch. And he's like, yeah, I'm afraid you're right. And it did. And then it became just, you know, the Alliance versus WB, and it wasn't even WCW anymore. You know what I mean? It's like we had Steve Austin as our leader. It's like, you know, Steve's great, one of the greatest things ever in the history of the business, but it's like, he's a WWE guy. You know what I mean? The fact that he actually, you know, worked in WCW for a while, it's like WCW shit on him. You know what I mean? It's like he's supposed to come to defend WCW. Come on. You know, they didn't think he had anything. You know, it was one of the stupid things they ever did. Let's release Austin. He can't draw money. Turned out to sell more monies in T-shirts than that whole company was making ever. But it was just one of those things that it just lost any WCW feel. And at that point, to me, it was just a, you know, Vince versus Shane and Steph, and it was, you know, it was great to be involved in the angle and stuff. But to me, it didn't have any of that WCW real company feel to it.
What did you think when the Young Americans idea was given to you?
I liked it because I thought it was going somewhere, but it was one of those things where, I don't know, I didn't feel the exact direction they were going was anything. I would like to have tried to do something a little bit different with it, but I don't know what. I liked it at first, because obviously it was going to be a push, and it was Vince's project. It was one of those things where Vince was the one that was actually writing our promos at first, and it was definitely a project him, so this could really be big. And so I liked it at first, but there was a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Just a lot of conflict amongst the three of us, unfortunately, that I think ended up killing the whole gimmick. It started with me doing it, right? Obviously, I was going to do basically go back to what I did before, the whole, pro-Canada, but it wasn't going to be pro-Canada, it was just going to be anti-USA. And then I did the thing where we did the segment where I basically talked Jay into joining me, so it was Christian and I, and then the following week we talked Test into joining us, and it was a group, and they were very much that, no, this is a group of three of us, Lance isn't our leader. And there was a lot of that crap thrown into it that I think the office got tired of, and one of the reasons why we ended up getting disbanded. It was one of those things where it'd come promo time, and it's like if they'd hand us our, this is going to be your verbiage tonight, and if I had a paragraph and they had a line, it was complaints about it. Why is he talking more than us?
Both Christian and Tess?
Yeah. Complain? And I love Jay, but Jay, tends to complain a bit.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things, too, that I don't think it was necessarily that they thought I was the leader, but it was one of those things where the first few promos that Vince wrote were very serious, hard-hitting promos. The whole thing with business did you have in Vietnam and all this other stuff, it's a pretty heavy promo. That was my style. Jay's promos are lighter and funnier and sarcastic, and it's like, he's a way better promo than me, but if you want to do a hard-hitting, good, godforsaken country, you shouldn't be in Vietnam and everything else, that's more my deal. So I think I had more verbiage that way, and I think they felt like they were going to be the lackeys to the group, so there was a little bit of infighting that way, and then the whole haircut issue came up, and I think the office just started, we were trying to...
What was the haircut issue?
They decided that when they first put the group together, it was, we don't want you guys to be bookends, you know what I mean? That's why, you've all got different things, you've got different outfits, we want you to have a common thread, but not be bookends. And so everyone was cool with that, but then they decided that everybody needed to look, I don't know whether they wanted the more military look or the more terrorist look or what the hell they were going for, but they wanted everybody to have my style of haircut. And I think, again, it was sort of the thing is like, it was playing into the was Lance our leader thing, because he's doing more of the talking, and now we have to look like him and get our haircut. And so they told us that, they needed to get their haircut, and short. And Jay was considering cutting his hair at that point anyway, but he wasn't planning on going to this short.
Yeah.
And so he fought a little bit, so I don't mind cutting my hair, but I don't want to have his haircut. And Tess fought it tooth and nail. There's no way I'm getting a haircut like Lance. No offense, I don't look like an idiot. And I sort of popped. He says, no offense, Lance, it looks good on you, but So there was tension that way, and I think they just sort of, at that point, look, we're trying to push you guys. You don't want to cooperate. The hell with you, and we don't think this gimmick has any legs anymore. And they put Regal with us right before that, and then it just sort of started falling apart at that point in time. And I think part of it was sabotage. I think it was one of those things, because if you look back at the history books and so forth, we were going to be a heel, originally it was going to be a heel group of four, and they were talking about putting Jericho with us, which actually I was all for. I actually pitched the idea of calling us C4 instead of the Un-Americans, because it was going to be 4 Canadians, and it was the whole C4 being explosive and so forth. And Jericho was going to be our Flair, Jay and I were going to be Tully and Arn, and then Tess was going to be the Luger, the Wyndham character. We were going to be basically the Four Horsemen type thing. We were pitching for that, and then oddly enough, we ended up had heat. We weren't as cooperative as we should have been. We all got disbanded, and then miraculously, Evolution came out. And it's like, I think someone else decided that they wanted to be the heel faction of four and to relive the Four Horsemen gimmick, and weren't going to let us do it. So I think there was a bit of sabotage on that end, and the in-debating and the complaining with the haircuts was just the excuse for these guys don't want the push, let's can it. We've got this other great idea for this other heel group of four that's going to be Horseman-esque. But I think had they let Jericho have the four of us, we could have been really something if they had really wanted to light fire on us and let us be the heel group.
Now you guys also worked a bunch with Hulk Hogan. How was he to work with?
He was so much fun. And it's funny, I was never ever a Hulk Hogan fan. And Jericho will even attest this, we got to camp and stuff. It's like I hated him. It was one of those things that he's a babyface. He punches and rakes eyes and stuff. It's like I hated him. I thought he was a terrible babyface. I admitted that he was a good champ as a fan because I realized that he drew money and stuff, but I never liked his stuff, never liked watching him. But obviously it was cool to work with Hogan because he was about as big a name as there was at the time, and so it was cool that way. But he was a great guy. He was so easy to work with. And it's one of those things that, if you've, when you work with a truly over babyface, nothing is easier. And he was, and it's like, even at times he sort of even joked, he said, oh, I feel so bad, you guys are doing all the work. And I said to him, I was like, bro, you bring the people, we'll do the work. And it was so easy, because he was sore. It was right after the whole, Rock Austin thing, where it was just, the Hogan reunion tour, where he was just loved and over so much. It was so easy. And he was really cool. And it was one of those things, too, where I think after if we did a run-in, I think it was the start of it, that we started doing a thing on a 6-man or something. Actually, no, it was a 6-man thing with Kishi, I believe, and it was at the Atlantic City Convention Center, because I remember actually a bunch of my buddies, because we actually, as fans, drove to Atlantic City and saw WrestleMania 4 and 5 there. And I got all the calls from all the buddies, oh my God, you're a star now, because I actually fed the Hogan comeback that night in the same building we saw Hogan wrestle for the first time. And it was one of those things where, okay, I was a pro wrestler, but I wasn't actually a WWE superstar until my buddies saw me wrestling with Hulk Hogan. So it was kind of cool in that respect too, but I think Hogan was cautious at first. With the nature of the business, it's, you know what I mean, it's like we could go in there and theoretically we could really beat him up or try not to, take shitty bumps for him and try to expose him or anything else. You couldn't do that if you wanted to be unprofessional. And I think he's from an old enough era that, stuff like that actually did happen. But it's like, I think that first time he realizes, okay, these guys are, here for business and everything else, made him look like $1 million and worked light with him and took care of him and everything else. So from that point on, he trusted us completely, and it's like, whatever you guys want to do, I'm here for you. And so it was great. Christian and I, put everything together, and this is what we can do. And when we was working with Edge, it was like the three of us would sit down and put it all together. And Hulk, how's this by you? Sounds great, guys. Thanks. And we just had a great time. It was cool because it was Hogan, so it's sort of a a thing for the scrapbook and stuff. He did the big program with Hogan, but the crowd was just there, so cool. And it was one thing too. I remember we did I think it was in Buffalo or Detroit. I think it was Detroit where we switched the titles on the Vengeance pay-per-view. And it was one of those things that during the heat and stuff, there was actually the USA chants and the Un-American stuff, and it was kind of cool that it is Hulk Hogan, but we are getting a response on our own that isn't just him. Granted, the whole USA thing, but it was stuff that was for us as well. So it wasn't just the Hogan show. The crowd was into the match on the whole. And, you had to work around his physical limitations, but he was, willing to do whatever he could. And there was even the one night where he actually, we were trying to figure out how we were going to heat on who and come back and so forth. We were having a hard time fitting in the Hulk up. And he's like, well, I don't need to get it in tonight. And he was professional, don't worry about my stuff. If it doesn't fit in, I won't do the Hulk up. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty nice of him. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, these people paid to see that. We're putting it in. But it was nice that he was big enough to say, if it's easier for you guys, I won't do my thing. Which I thought was extremely cool.
Looking at some of the other gimmicks he had in WWE, there was the boring gimmick. Who came up with that idea, and what did you think of it?
I don't know whose original idea it was. Who came to? I think Dean Malenko came to. He pulled me aside and said, "I just want to give you the heads up. This has been mentioned." And it hadn't been officially decided yet, but I guess it had come up in booking meetings, and he was nice enough to say, "I just want to give you the heads up. This is on the table." And I'm like, "Oh, great!" And I think actually, I think Edge was still on SmackDown. I called him. He might have been off still with a neck injury. I'm not even sure. I called him. I was like, "You're not going to believe this." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, so I told him. He's like, "No way!" It's like, this is just the dumbest idea on the planet. So when they decided to go through for it, they pulled me aside and pitched that it was the idea, but it was supposed to be akin to the Kurt Angle "you suck" thing. And that's the way it was pitched to me. That they want to start trying to get the catchphrases and the crowd interaction back. And I think by getting them to chant boring during my matches will be the way of, and it was explained to me that this is going to be the kickstart of a big thing. And even Austin comes and says, "Man, they're getting ready to strap the rocket to you, kid. If there's any way I can help on promos and stuff, just let me know." He says, "Not like I can show you anything in the ring, but on, character and getting over with the crowd." He says, "Anything you need, I'm here to help you with and stuff. We're doing this thing tonight, and it's supposed to be the start of a real big push for you." I thought, oh, that was, extremely cool of Steve to, offer to help me in any way he could and stuff, not only put over my work. I was like, "No, thanks, Steve." And I figured, okay, well, we're actually having Steve involved in this angle. It can't be just, to bury me. They're not going to waste Steve on some stupid thing. So maybe this thing's actually going to go somewhere. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'll see what happens with it. And then the thing, Cade went out and had the match, and Steve's like, boring, I'm going to fall asleep. And I'm like, this is just atrocious. Especially because it was right around the time that they're having all the talent meetings saying how we're going to slow our style down. We can't just be doing, jumping off higher and higher ladders. Our bodies are getting broken down. We've had 8 guys out with neck surgery. We need to re-educate fans and slow things down. We don't have WCW to worry about anymore. There's no competition. We can slow this down and re-educate our fans. Okay, and then you have this thing where I'm going to go out and you're going to say my matches are boring. So we did the first thing, and I hated it. I actually sent an email to Brian Gewirtz, the one guy that was the head writer of Raw, and pitched that, I really think this is off to a bad start. Is there any way that we can get across that my personality is boring, or I'm a really boring promo, but I'm a good wrestler? I said, do the thing where maybe Steve bans me from the microphone and try to get over the shut up and wrestle kid thing. I said, at least that way my matches aren't boring, and put over my personality and so forth. So the next week at TV, actually Vince pulled me aside. I guess Brian sent him my email and stuff, and he was assuring me that this, was going to be a good thing, and don't worry about it. And, even if you find it embarrassing, I've peed myself on national TV to draw money. You need to just do what you're told. And I'm like, okay, cool. I just think there's. So that the following week is when we did the highlight reel thing with Jericho, where I was going to go out and explain that I'm not boring, and they were saying, oh, you cut a really bad promo, and I said, okay, this is what could work. If you put over the fact that I can wrestle, but it's my. And they said, okay, you're going to cut this promo and try to be as boring and more monotone flat as you can. I'm like, I can't just go there and purposely cut a bad promo, because it'll look like I'm purposely cutting a bad promo. So I'm trying to think of a way of doing it. And literally, like 2 minutes before I went out, I got the idea of reading it like a bad speech. But I'm going to read a prepared statement. And I do the token eye contact and look back, and I got the idea 5 minutes before I went out the curtain. And I thought it went over really good. All the boys were like, man, that was great. It was so ridiculous the way you did it and stuff, and I got really good feedback. So I'm like, okay, this can actually work. So we did the house show loops the following week, and it was working to a certain extent. I'd go up to the ring or whatever, and the crowd would be boring, boring, boring. And so I grabbed the microphone, and I'd like to read the following prepared statement. I am not boring. I've looked up the definition of boring. This is what it is. I am not boring. And the crowd would boo the shit out of me and chant boring. Babyface music would hit. I'd do the whole, WCW thing with the look, and they'd come out to the ring, and the crowd would cheer for them. I was like, okay, this might actually work. It slowed our matches down a little bit, because as soon as I grabbed a hold, they chant boring. But I found that once we were in the heat, they chant boring. I'd tell the babyface just to sit still, and they'd get it out of their system, and then they start chanting for the babyface, and it would work. And I actually pulled Vince aside and Brian aside and said, I was wrong. This thing is actually working. It seems to be working. We're finding our stride on the house shows and so forth with it. As long as we're careful as far as the matches go, it seems to work. A week later, we're going to do the thing with Goldust, we're going to change it. I just agreed to it. Now, you know what I mean? It was when I first said I don't want to do it, we're going full steam ahead. I'm like, you know what? You might be right. It could work. Oh, we're changing directions. I'm like, okay. And
did they give you any explanation as to why?
No, of course not. Okay. And it was weird that way too. And it was, where's I going with the boring? Oh, and really, I think the thing that was really killing the boring thing was Jerry Lawler. And I don't think it was intentional, but Jerry's very much, he wants to be real and authentic on commentary. He doesn't like going to production meetings. And I think it was one of the things where the bookers and the writers wanted it to go that my personality was boring. Jerry just knew that I was the boring guy, so every time I grabbed a hold, who wants to see a wrestling hold? This kid's boring. And it really took it down a wrong road, that it was getting harder on TV because he was burying the match in the wrong way. And it's like, I think it hurt them in the long run, because it's like still to this day, I think when you encourage a crowd to chant boring, it starts becoming an even chant, and they just look for any opportunity to do it. And I think it's backfired in the long run, that they can get more boring chants than they should. But it was shortly after that they decided that they're going to do we're going to put you with Goldust and stuff. You're going to be like a head cheese type tag team and stuff. We think it might be funny. If it gets over, you can be a babyface with Goldust. If you don't, you can just turn on Goldust and you'll be a heel again. Okay, but it was right after I basically agreed that it could actually work. They decided to go another way, and it's like, whatever. And so then we decided to start doing the Goldust thing. And that was a lot of fun, because it's like, Goldust to me is one of the most entertaining guys there is. And he's a good worker too. So it's one of those things, we're getting to work with Dustin, because I'd worked, a dozen programs with him with Christian as Young Americans with him in book. So I'd worked with Dustin a lot and had good matches with him and liked him, and he was hilarious. So the thought of doing all these little pre-tapes things with him was, okay, that'll be fun. But again, it was one of those things where I'm the boring guy, and he's trying to give me some personality, and I keep being the flat, and I'm the butt of the joke. And it's like, I actually pulled him aside at one point and I said, okay, we're going to turn me babyface at some point in time, right, and be with Dustin? They're like, well, yeah. I said, well, you realize I can't be the butt of the joke forever. At some point in time, I have to do something cool. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the segments are funny and the crowd enjoys the segment, but they're not getting behind me. It's Dustin's really funny making fun of the boring idiot. And it's like, you actually want me to be a babyface, I have to at some point in time be cool. And it's, oh yeah, well, we'll do this. And they pitched a couple ideas that never happened. And then unfortunately Dustin he had fought through a few injuries and so forth, so he had some time off for some injuries, and he had some time off for some personal issues and stuff. And then he hurt his elbow, and it got to the point where I think they decided that, Dustin's just, taking too much time off, he's hurt too long or whatever else, and they decided they're going to release Dustin. So it's like, now I've started this thing, and it's like, we're going to be a tag team. And our very first match together, they decided it's his last match, and he's going to go home and get his elbow worked on. So it's like our debut. Oh, I did the single match with Rico, which they actually did right. They were going to turn me babyface with a match with Rico. So it's like, they had the Rico sucks chant, which was a guarantee at that point in time. So if they started the boring thing, Dustin was supposed to start the Rico sucks chant and stuff and redirect the crowd. So it was smart that way. And okay, I'll go over clean on him. I get to kiss the girl and stuff. I'll be a good guy. And this is when the whole dancing thing started. And again, it was just one of the things that I think got misdirected just from lack of communication. That it was originally supposed to be like an Icky Shuffle end zone dance. It was just supposed to be, the shell has cracked, showed some excitement, did a little bit of a something to celebrate the win. And I think it was just one of those things that I wasn't the priority. That, oh shoot, I got rock stuff, I've got awesome stuff to go do. Lance is dancing at the end of his match, see you later. And then the agent's like, well, you've got to dance. And all of a sudden I'm a dancing buffoon doing the Scotty 2 Hottie gimmick instead of just having a little bit of celebration. And it's just one of those things where it started going, and I fought it, which I think was one of those things why they pushed it even harder. It was one of those things like, why am I dancing? What do you mean? It's like, well, I went 5 years in this business and never broke a smile. Now all of a sudden, for no reason whatsoever, I'm dancing. At no point in time it was transition. It was I'm the straight man and Dustin's funny, to all of a sudden I'm dancing. I'm like, why? Well, you're happy now. Why? And it got to the point where, they were told that I was supposed to do a, dance for 30 seconds at the end of the match, and it was like 20 seconds. And they're like, well, I didn't dance enough. So the next, on the house show loops, it was actually written on the thing. It's like, Lance has match, must dance for at least 1 minute. And it was like the agent, he wasn't worried about the finish, wasn't worried about the match, it was you have to dance for a full minute. And it's like, I think they had a stopwatch on me, and since I wasn't getting behind the dancing thing as much, it's like they pushed it even further. And I even pulled the one writer aside, I think it was Dave Lagana. He was at one of the house show loops, the writers were doing some of them, and I said, at some point, you want me to be a babyface. The fans are going to try to relate to me. At some point in time, they're going to be wondering why I'm dancing. And the fact that I'm not a good dancer, it's like, how is this going to benefit me? And have crowds, because they're always on you. You have to relate to the crowd. You have to get yourself over. You have to be a character that the crowd can relate to, which is the whole nature of our business. And I'm like, there's no reason why I'm dancing. And when I'm not dancing well, it's like I'm just the idiot out here doing things. And they fixed it for a little while because they had me doing it with Stacy. But again, it just sort of ends up falling through the cracks a lot of times. There was a point where I was working with Test. I was a babyface, and Test was a heel, and he had Stacy and was healing Stacy. And we'd do the finish where somehow, Stacy would get involved. Test would chase Stacy. She'd roll out of the ring. I'd super kick Test, pin Test on the house shows. Stacy would roll in the ring, and we'd dance together. So at least it got a pop because Stacy's out there shaking her butt and showing her legs, so cheer. I don't care how stupid I look. It's Stacy. So that was sort of working. But it's like, where is this going? It's like I can't do this for. It's just so not me and so not natural. It has no reason for being, but I think it was one of those things that, they said dance for 30 seconds and I didn't, so it's like, well, he has to do what he's told, so they just went gung-ho with, he's going to be dancing.
That's how, the system there works?
To a certain extent. I think it's, they expect blind obedience, and I think to a certain extent, too, they were trying to find some, and again, this is just speculation on my part, but I got the impression at some point in time, because I always just did what I was told, that they were trying to find something I'd say no to. Part of the back of my mind thinks that it's like, they kept, it's even Pat that went, I need somebody, you could job to Mark Henry in 45 seconds, and I'm like, okay. He's like, well, you're hard to deal with, aren't you? I was like, well, it's my job, what do I care? And Pat always used to joke, well, you're tough to get along with, and then it's like, and it was the dancing thing, and then it was the do this, and it's like, I think to a certain extent they were pushing to see where I would go. And it's like, I tried, but it's like, it's just not doable, and it was silly. It's like, I can't dance. I spent the whole day trying to, and actually, what's her name? I can't remember her name. One of the stagehands. I just saw her last night on your show. But it was one of those things where I'm back to, it's like, what am I going to do? I don't know how to dance. And she's trying to come up with a few moves and ideas and stuff, and Hurricane comes over and starts showing me his 3-count steps. But you can do this. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. It was just so not natural. It was so ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like when I talk to, Callis, he says, it's so ridiculous. They keep saying they can't think of anything to do. He says, you're the easiest guy in the world to book. Give you 10, 12 minutes and send you to the ring. It's like, let the people who, and I think that's the problem with writers now as opposed to bookers, and I think that's why Paul was so good. It's like they try to think of an idea and then shove somebody in it instead of, it's like the Arab thing. We want to do this Arab gimmick, we think there would be heat in Arab. Oh, this guy sort of looks like an Arab, let's have him do it. He was so not ready for that spot. Instead of finding who's ready and going, what can we do with him? Instead of that way, it was, here's Lance, we need a dancing guy, let's make him dance. People look at me and know what my strength is and go that way. You know what I mean? You wouldn't make Benoit dance. Not that I'm Benoit, but Benoit's obvious strengths are wrestling. You want to get Benoit where you don't give him 45-minute promo segments. You give him 45 minutes of match time, he'll knock you on your butt. And it's just one of those things that just seemed to be so absurd that they were just taking me the most unnatural direction in the world.
Well, then things got even more ridiculous with the large penis gimmick. Well,
yes.
Whose idea was that, and what do you how did they even present that to you?
Brian Gewirtz was the one that presented it to me, and I think it was one of those things where I think, again, he gave me like a week's heads up that, just so you know, this has been mentioned. Because I think it's one of those things where there's certain guys that, okay, we need to find something for him. He's a good hand. And I think I was one of those guys that was always on the table with what are we going to do with him, and they're trying to come up with something, and they throw everything at the wall and see what sticks or what somebody will comment to. And I guess at one point in time it was, how funny it would be if he was the human tripod and had a large hose. And so it was mentioned. So he was the first one to tell me about it. And that it was on the table, and it was Dean again that came to me and said, we're going to put you with Val, you're going to be doing the whole porn gimmick because you got a large hose. And I'm like, I thought we were doing reality-based television. And he sort of laughed, and it was one of those things that, again, I was, I talked to Dean openly about it because I was close with Dean and I trusted Dean, but I said to him, why? He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, they just 6 months ago made Chief Morley go back to the Val Venus gimmick. I said, and for 6 months they haven't come up with one good idea for something for him to do. He'd done nothing. I said, now you're going to have two of us doing it. He's like, yep. Well, if you couldn't think of anything for Val to do, what's he going to do for two of us to do it? And it was ridiculous. And it was actually the first time that I actually debated saying no. It's one of those things where I'm of the impression that the only way you can say no is if you're willing to walk away. Because, it's your job. And I actually sat down with my wife and said, you know what? At this point in time, I said, with this gimmick, I said, if you don't want me to do it, I'll quit. I think I had a year left on my contract. My back was bothering me pretty solid at this point in time. And, business was down, so pay was down. So it's like, my back was killing me. Paychecks were lower than they'd been in the last 6 years of my career. Creatively, I was just so unhappy and not challenged. Working heat matches with guys from OVW that are getting brought up that I could do in my sleep without even thinking about, and they still are probably better matches than they're expecting out of me. So I was just really unhappy on all fronts. And my wife had mentioned before that occasionally when she took my daughters to school and stuff, she'd get flack in the schoolyard from other moms with, her husband on TV with Tylene Buck and different things and stuff like that. So I knew there was a potential that she'd get backlash for the whole, because it was pitched that it was going to be the whole porn gimmick where we're going to be, all but shooting amateur porn with Val and taking the hard edge gimmick with everything else, and you're going to have a large penis. So I pulled my wife aside and I said, do you really want me doing this on TV? And she said, I don't care. I said, what about, other moms and stuff? Are you going to take flack with it? I said, if you don't want to put up with it, I said, I'd be more than happy to say no. If they fire me, great. And I actually basically at that point in time said, I'll give up the gimmick and I'll quit and do something else. And she says, you know what, you've got a year left on your contract at this point in time. Why don't you just finish it up, take the money and do what you're told. She says, I don't mind. I said, okay, if you don't care, I don't care. You know what I mean? It's Lance Storm, it's not Lance Evers. I don't really care what I do on TV. And so we went ahead with the gimmick. And I said, okay, well, that's what we're doing. So we did a bunch of stupid pre-tapes. It was one of those things where the thing was done so poorly that I bet you half the audience doesn't even know that was my gimmick. But there was also it was the nail in the coffin that I knew that I was going to end my in-ring career with WWE. I was on the Park and Jet bus going to my car when I was flying home from the road. There was a lady that was on my flight that was sitting beside me on the bus and we started talking. Oh, what do you do? I know I wrestle. Oh, really? If I tuned in on Monday night, I could see you. And I said, yeah. She said, oh, I'll have to try to check it out. And she got off the bus and I was sitting there going, God, I hope she doesn't tune in. And it was the only time in the history of my career where I was embarrassed what I was doing. And at that point in time, I'm like, you know what? When this contract's up, I'm not signing another one. And at that point in time, I was like, okay, maybe I'll, I think TNA was going at that point. I'll consider them. I'll consider going back to Japan. I'll do whatever. And then I realized that the agent job was a possibility, so I started looking into that because I still enjoyed working for WWE, but just creatively and on camera, I realized that they weren't ever going to do anything with me that I actually enjoyed ever again. And my body was hurt too, so it was like, do I really need this anymore? And I was embarrassed for what I was doing, and I'm like, I'm not going to be embarrassed at what I do. I'll just do something else. And it was the only time, even the ECW getting urine dumped in my face, I was never embarrassed about it. It was good television. I was the butt of the joke, but it was good television. But this was, to me, was just stupid and had no point. And I'm like, at that day, sitting on that Park and Jet bus, I decided that I was not signing another talent contract with WWE.
Had the whole becoming a trainer at OVW thing come up?
it started talking to Fit, because Fit was a road agent that I really got along with. I love Fit.
Dave Finley?
Dave Finley. Got more respect for him than anybody. Love the guy. And I was doing a little bit of agenting unofficially. It was one of those things where, because he worked with the girls all the time. And if he was on the other loop when the girl Raw matches and stuff, they'd assign it to Terry Taylor or whatever, but when Fit first came in and started working with the girls, I worked with him. It was like Fit and I a lot of times would work with the girls in the ring and stuff. If the girls wanted to try stuff, I'd get in the ring and work with them. Or if Fit needed to demonstrate, I always would do it with them. So I had a really good working relationship with the girls. So they got to the point where if there was a house show and Fit wasn't there, they'd come to me and ask for my opinion, and I'd help them with their matches and stuff a little bit. So I was sort of doing sort of a slight, backdoor agenting a little bit with the girls and helping them out. And then when some of the younger OVW guys were coming up, I was disagreeing with a lot of the agent direction they were getting from some of the agents and stuff, and I talked to Fit about it and everything else, and he brought up, he says, you make a good agent. And I said, well, what's your road schedule like? Because this was when I was already looking for other options. He said, well, we don't, he said, obviously we have the same schedule as you guys, but he says, there's more agents than there are for the loops. He says, I usually only work 3 out of the 4 weeks a month. He gets left off 1 loop every month. I'm like, that's not a bad road schedule. It'd be 25% less than what I'm doing now. And he sort of, so I asked him, what's sort of the pay like? And he's like, well, we're sort of similar, but on a different downside, and we get there and everything else. And it was really for where I was at, because I was on a crap spot in the card. It'd be a slight pay cut, but probably not that much with the 25% reduction in road schedule. I'm like, if I could get a 3/4 road schedule, this would be good. And I thought, at that point, I felt like I had the respect of the entire locker room, that I think I would be accepted, even though I was coming right off the talent. Because obviously, I'm not going to be an agent on, Austin or Rock's match anyway. I'd be working with the other guys anyway, so it's not like Steve would have to listen to me. And even still, it's like I could sit in a production meeting and tell Steve what they want, but I'm certainly not, do what you want, Steve. I'm not going to tell him what to do. But I think everyone else in the locker room I had worked with enough. And really, half the locker room, whenever I had matches with him, I was the one putting the damn thing together anyway, so it's not like it would matter all that much if I was an agent. So I had pitched to Johnny the possibility of being an agent. He said, well, I'll talk to JR and see what he thinks. So I met with JR and talked about it, and he said Vince was concerned with the quick transition from locker room to agent. He thought that was too quick of a transition. He had reservations about it. But he said, how would you feel about being a trainer? Because I guess they had just fired Rip Rogers in OVW. He says, we need a trainer for OVW. Would you consider that? And I had, trained guys before, and I'd liked that aspect of the business. So I'm like, okay, what's the road schedule like? and Johnny come back with we expect you to move. I said, well, I'm not moving anywhere. I said, I've traveled from Calgary this long. I'm not moving now. I'll quit the business before I move. He said, well, that's not a deal breaker. We're still open to the possibility. So I talked with JR and worked out a deal to training. And I think it was just throwing the bone there to get me to agree, because they really needed a trainer in that spot. And really, I was doing that anyway, because it's like every time they brought up a new act from OVW, I was the one working with them on the road. And even Vince pulled me aside. I really appreciate what you're doing. You're the kind of style of worker that we like here. I really appreciate that you're working with these younger guys and helping them out. And it was one of those things too. It's like, okay, so I'm working on the road trying to teach these guys how to work my style because you love the way I work, so you can put them on TV. So why aren't you just putting me on TV? And at that point in time, I think, well, you know what, the trainer gig's probably a good idea, because it's frustrating when you're on the active roster and they're saying, teach this guy so we can push them ahead of you because they suck. And it's like, okay, I'm teaching them to have my job. So at least with the trainer gig, it's like I'm not on the active roster anymore. It's just training guys. Okay, great. So it seemed like a good fit. And they threw the bone out there that maybe after a 6 months or a year as a trainer, you've been out of the locker room long enough, maybe we can bring you back and offer you an agent's job if one opens up. But not a week after I accepted the trainer's job did they hire Skinner and then Steamboat. So it's like, okay, they weren't having any intentions of offering me an agent gig. But I ended up loving the trainer's job. So we negotiated a road schedule that I liked. And we fought hard over money because they didn't want to pay me what I wanted. But fortunately, they didn't have any other options and had to cave in and pay me what I wanted. So it worked out to be a really good gig. And I ended up really loving Danny Davis and the group down there. So it was great.
Okay. Now, on WrestleMania weekend, there was a thing with you and Bradshaw where I guess he was upset about what you told some of the guys at OVW about them getting ribbed or something. But what happened there?
Classic wrestling was something that was blown out of proportion, and I don't know for sure what he was told, but there was, from the best I can tell, there was a point where Mark Henry was down, and he had asked me sort of how do we deal with different guys when guys take liberties in the ring and different things, and it was about somebody, it wasn't even John that we were talking about, and So I said, okay, let's have a conversation here and be honest. You guys want the truth, let's have it, but what's said in OVW stays in OVW, because I don't want to, 2 weeks have, Mark Henry said this, or Lance Storm said this. What's said here stays here. And we had an open conversation about all the different ways of getting heat and dealing with, and actually the whole Liberty thing was a Bubba Ray Dudley issue, it wasn't even a Bradshaw issue, because they were, Caden and Jindrak and stuff were working with them a lot on house shows, and they'd get chopped to crap. To the point where they were the heels and they were getting sympathy on the heels because they felt so sorry for those guys getting beat up so bad by the duds. And at some point in time in that conversation, I mentioned that, there's a group of a few guys up there that tend to be more sensitive to, having heat, and if they get heat with them, it spreads and so forth. So really go to your way to say hi and mind your P's and Q's around, Bob Holly, JBL, and I think Billy Gunn was still there at the time. And those were sort of the, 3 guys that if you don't say hi to, or if you disrespect, they take offense and they make sure everybody knows about it. Where other guys will just take offense and it'll just be that. And so I said, these are guys you really have to watch your P's and Q's around. That's the only thing I can recall saying about John that you could say was bad. I may have said something else, but that's all I recall. And obviously someone stooged it off. I found out afterwards, I'm almost positive it was Mordecai, Kevin Verdict, because he was on the phone to them all the time when anything came up. And so I went to WrestleMania weekend not thinking anything of it, and I saw Bob at the Hall of Fame thing. And I said, hey Bob, he's like, yeah, I'm the bully you talk about in OVW. I'm like, okay. And it was, just a sort of a gruff comment. It's like, okay, whatever. Bob's not my best friend apparently. No big deal. And then at WrestleMania, I hadn't saw John the whole day, and I'm sitting in the trainer's room, and he came in taping up, getting ready for his match or whatever. I'm like, hey John, how you doing? I heard what you said in OVW, that's bullshit. You want to find me, you know where I am? And I'm like, what did I say, John? You know what you said, I heard what you said. And I said, I don't recall badmouthing you about John, what did I say? You know where I am, the hell with you, that's bullshit. And I'm like, I think had it not been WrestleMania and had John not had a really big important match, then maybe it would have gotten worse. But he, cussed me out for 30 or 40 seconds and said, you know where I am if you want to, make something of this, whatever else. And he stormed off and had his match. And Hurricane was there. He's like, what did you say? I said, I don't even know. And maybe it was the fact that I said he was one of the guys that, takes offense more than other guys, which obviously from the effects of my comments is true. So I don't know. Maybe whoever stooged it off said things and took them out of context, and maybe he had heard something far worse. Maybe he just took offense to that. I really don't know. And it got escalated because it was the one build up to the One Night Stand pay-per-view where he in Edmonton went out and just buried me and buried my wrestling school and everything else, and a live promo on the show that they actually edited out of the show. So he obviously was, hot for a long period of time over something that was really pretty stupid and secondhand. But if he wants to be mad, so be it.
Did he say anything to you at One Night Stand or any
Nope.
build-up?
We didn't cross paths other than just talking past each other. It's one of those things that not worth the headache to me, and it's like I got a show to do, and obviously me and him had a few words, but other than that, it's just one of the things that I'm at the point where it's like I really can't be bothered. You know what I mean? It's like if he wants to be mad at me, great. If he wants to be nice to me, great. I really don't care. It's like I don't have time to waste energy on having heat with somebody or caring what somebody said, and it's like I'm here to have a match with Jericho. Other than that, I really don't care.
Well, we're on the subject. What are your memories from One Night Stand? What was that? That, of course, right now it's your last match against Chris Jericho. What was that day like for you?
The day was great, although even before that, because Paul started coming down doing TVs in OVW. I don't know, he wasn't doing TVs yet, but he was doing promo lessons with the guys. So I was going out to dinner with Paul and stuff, and we would, with him and Dreamer and stuff, we discussed the whole booking of the whole One Night Stand thing. So I was actually involved way before the show ever got, running who would you put in matches and stuff. So I even had a little bit of creative input on it. So we were debating it the whole time, and there was a point where I wasn't even going to have a match on the show because there just wasn't one that made sense. That I was originally at one point in time I was just going to do the run-in at the end of the last match because there wasn't a match that really made sense. The one that made the most sense was me and Dreamer, to have Beulah and Dawn Marie involved, because when we did the Dreamer Storm feud before, we never had Beulah. So it was like that was a really good thing, but they needed his star power in the main event. So it was one of those things where, I ended up taking the hit, and Paul says, would you be offended if you don't actually wrestle on the show? I said, well, I don't want to wrestle a match that doesn't mean anything. So if you don't have a meaningful match, I'll take whatever I get, but I'll do the run-in and that's it. But I said, obviously I want to wrestle on the show, but it's got to be the right match. So then the idea came up with Jericho. I said, well, from an ECW standpoint, it doesn't mean anything. But, from my career standpoint, it means a lot. I said, I'd love to work with Chris. So, and it was one of those things where even back, my first year in the business, I sort of half joked that if Jericho and I stayed tight, it'd be cool to finish my career with the same match that I started with. So the fact that at this point in time, I'd already had my last match, And then I looked at this chance to come back for this one night stand thing. I'm like, yeah, I can come back and have my match with Jericho and actually, bookend my career. So I'm like, this is gonna be great. And I've always loved working with Chris. And then it even got better when they said, oh, you're gonna be the opener. I'm like, oh my God, that's great. It's like some people say, oh, you're a curtain jerker, but to me, opening match is the second best spot on the card. And especially with the one night stand thing, because it was ECW fans that for years wanted that show. So there'd be so much anticipation, and we get to be out there and get the first reaction. And, the only disappointing thing was we only had, 7 minutes for our match or whatever. But the show was just so heavily booked that, it's all we could get. But maybe it was a blessing in surprise, because I hadn't been in the ring for having a match in like a year. Maybe if they'd given us 15 minutes, I would have blown up and sucked. But at least with it being 7.5, I could get through it all.
What was the atmosphere like backstage that day?
It was really cool. As much as the last Nitro was like graduation, it's like this was really the class family reunion thing. And the fact that they had the original security guys, the original refs and everything, the camera guys and everything else, it was such a happy atmosphere of, hey, great to see you again. And it really did have an authentic ECW feel to it. It's like they put it in an ECW building. They put it with, they got a real ECW ring. They had the ECW security. So it really had that feel. So it was really cool. And everybody was just, the big family reunion thing. And there was the different, there was the SmackDown group of the Invaders and Raw that really sort of stayed to their side. The ECW guys stayed to their side and stuff. But it was really a great atmosphere of, it was great to see everybody again and have one last fun time with it.
Yeah. All right, going back to OVW. What are the things that WWE wanted you to teach the OVW wrestlers?
They didn't really give me a real tight criteria, but it was one of those things that the fact that I had been on the talent roster sort of doing it with the young guys anyway, we were having our meetings with this is the way we want our work style to be now, you guys need to be able to work this kind of way, and Vince saying, you're the exact style we want, Lance, please work with these guys, I appreciate it. I had a pretty good idea what they wanted. It was, go down and train these guys and prepare them for TV. So I went down there and really did what I thought was appropriate. Like I didn't have a real stringent guideline. It was like, okay, you run practice every day, you run for however many hours and prepare them for TV. And so I went down there, I had no idea what to expect. And I worked on, for the most part, just strictly ring psychology. Because I think most of the guys, there was a few guys that I had to train from scratch. Bobby Lashley had just started, maybe taken a few bumps when I got there. Nick Nemeth hadn't even started yet, so I gave him his first bump pretty much. So those guys I had to train from scratch with the technical aspect. And some of them I sort of, a few of the pet peeves that I knew the agents had and stuff were technical things that I, had pet peeves with, I sort of tried to correct and change. And then it was just strictly ring psychology, as far as, trying to tell a proper story and get crowd reaction and don't just do moves for the sake of moves. And so I worked on that, and I think I did a pretty good job. And a lot of the guys down there said that, in the time that I was there, they learned more from me than anyone else had ever trained with or worked with. That no one had ever actually explained the whole point of feeling a crowd and reacting to what's going on. And I think a lot of, maybe it's just because it's a similar view, so maybe I was doing it too, but a lot of the trainers before me and even maybe the trainers after me and Jimmy to a certain extent was trying to teach them the way they thought the business should be, but I was teaching them the way that WWE expected them to be, even if it wasn't necessarily what I thought the business should be. It's like, I know Rip used to, you guys are going to go and wrestle an hour.
Rogers. He was the previous trainer.
He was the one that got released before I got the job. And it's like, he'd have these guys do an hour Broadway. And I'm like, when are they ever going to need that? And it's like, I might think that the business is best if you've got 25 minutes and go out there and just call it all in the ring and feel it. But realistically speaking, these guys are going to get brought up and have 6 minutes on TV. Well, you can't feel it and just call it out there and have a good time and react to the crowd in 4.5 minutes on TV. So I made the effort of trying to prepare them for what they're going to need to do when they get up there. These are the guys you're going to be working with. These are the way they like to lay out their matches. This is the time constraints you're going to have. I'm going to teach you to be prepared when you get called up. And I think a lot of guys, well, calling the match in the ring is a dying art, and they need to go out there and call a 45-minute match. And it's like, yeah, that is a great way of the business, and I agree that that's a good aspect to learn, and I think they should learn to call things on the fly, but it's like you need to prepare them for where they're going to be first. And where they're going to be is, 6 minutes on TV and hitting a time cue. So that's what I concentrated on. And, trying to explain why things are the way they are. But it's part of the way the ring psychology that WWE wants and does, to a large extent, is what I like and what I do, which I think is why, Vince wanted me in the spot. So it's, so sort of teaching the way I think it should be as well, but I was concentrating more on where realistically they're going to be. And I think sometimes it's like, oh, this is the way the businesses be, this is the way it was when I broke in, and that's the way I learned. It's like, well, yeah, but the way I learned was 15 years ago.
Did you and Cornette ever butt heads on that kind of thing?
We butted heads up, not that we butted heads, but we had differences of opinion on a few of his booking ideas for TV. And it's not his fault, because he was at sort of cross purposes in that he was booking for the good of OVW, which is a separate entity to WWE that has to make money and be profitable, and Jimmy's a part owner of that, I believe. So he was booking to what he thought was best for OVW, which I didn't necessarily think was best for WWE. So we had, we were cross purposes and butted heads a little bit, but never to the point where we were, angry or fighting, because Jimmy and I, thankfully, for their Smoky Mountain experience, had a good relationship. But I think we had differences of opinion on where things should go. His idea of what a babyface is and what WWE and I think the babyfaces are two different things. And a lot of times it's like, he didn't agree with the WWE product or like the way they were going, so he would try to teach guys the way it should be. And it's like, well, they're contracted to WWE, I'm teaching them the way that WWE wants them to be. Whether I think it's right or not isn't really my place. I actually lean to more towards the WWE style than Jimmy's style, but again, it was just cross purposes a little bit.
Okay. Who were like some of the top guys when you first got there that are in WWE right now?
Wow. The top guy down there isn't on WWE TV still. I'm a big Matt Cappotelli fan. He's really good. I worked with him down there a little bit, and I actually worked with him a lot, but he's really good, and unfortunately just creative and injuries and stuff have never coordinated for his time. But probably the group that I take the most pride in is M&M. Joey Matthews at the time, wasn't a contracted guy. He was just in OVW trying to get a break. And I'd worked with him in a dark match or a heat match at one point in time, so I'd worked with him before. And I thought they were really good. And I worked with Melina a lot because she wanted to be a wrestler. She didn't want to be a valet. And I had a long talk with her about, valet is an important gig, don't sell it short. And really pushed how important Dawn Marie was to the whole package with me. And I think really sort of showed her how to, she was a little bit shy. And she wasn't stepping up. I'm like, you need to, the whole ring entrance thing. It's like, that's your time to shine. Steal the camera, beg the camera to be on you. And she wasn't at first. And I think I helped her a lot with that. And they really stepped up. And I pushed. Dreamer helped too. We all pushed really hard to get them to notice Joey. And then, this group really works. And they finally did and brought him up. And I thought they've done really well. I really take pride in that those, guys that I really pushed and tried to help, and I think really answered the call. A lot of the other guys that got pulled up weren't necessarily my choices to get pulled up. But the Dicks were guys I worked with. Bobby Lashley was guys I worked with. Chris Masters for a little bit. He got pulled up shortly after I got there. Carlito I worked with a bit. Who else? There's actually quite a few of them. Well, anybody that got brought up sort of post the Sheldon Benjamin, Randy Orton era. Anybody after that, pretty much, I had some degree of influence with.
Did now you mentioned that maybe they weren't your picks to go up to WWE. Ever ask you your opinion on who should be called up? Or
I had to send in weekly and monthly talent reports, so I would have to assess everybody, and say this is he's improving, he's weak here, he's strong here, this person is definitely ready, this guy is nowhere near ready, and they didn't always necessarily take my advice, and I think part of that goes back to the whole booker writer scenario, where they'll see Bobby Lashley and go, oh, hey, I've got an idea for him. We need him ready next week. It's like, he's had 3 matches. He's not going to be ready by next week. Instead of going, okay, who's ready? These 3 guys are ready. Okay, let's think of an idea. Unfortunately, we have the idea. They're putting the cart before the horse a lot of times, I think. It's like, oh, we have a creative idea and he fits the bill. So guys get brought up, and it was one of those things where, and Gene Snitsky, it's like, there was the Kane thing, they needed to lay Kane out for him to go shoot that movie or whatever. So it's like, we need a really big, mean-looking heel, and he was the really big, mean-looking heel, so he got brought up. There was guys in OVW that were obviously more ready than Gene, but he got the call because of that, and thankfully he's busted his hump and managed to, keep them happy and fulfill his spot, and he stayed there. But, it wasn't necessarily that I would have necessarily said he's the next guy that should get called up. Unfortunately, it's whoever fits the bill for the idea they have a lot of times, which is one of the reasons why Matt Cappotelli is still in OVW, even though he's, in my opinion, by far the best worker they've got down there.
Were there any other guys that were ever disrespectful or didn't listen to your advice?
The only guy that, they were all really good with one exception, and he, to me, and I was, far from a supporter of his with Muhammad Hassan. He was one of those guys that always had an excuse. So we're doing this drill. Oh, I need to have ice on my shoulder. It's hurt. Well, why'd you do that? Yeah, but. He always had a yeah, but. He always had an excuse. Always had an injury to sit out. Before he got brought up, I was, the last person in the world I would have recommended to get brought up. And they brought him up because he fit the bill and really didn't do well, and he's gone already. And I think it was one of those things where they needed, they needed to have somebody for that gimmick, not the other way around. But they had the gimmick and just wouldn't put anybody they wanted in it. And I didn't like his work, and I didn't like his attitude. But everybody else down there has been really, really respectful and really appreciative of everything. And actually, my last day down there, it's like, they all got me a bunch of gifts and threw a party, and one guy drew up a caricature of me with the flag, the OVW flag, and so forth, like my Canadian one, promo photo and stuff, and they all signed it with the rest of it. And it was really cool. And I've kept in touch with a lot of them. And a lot of them have, the guys that have got, all the ones that have got called up, like Ken Kennedy, and those guys when they got called up, all told me I really want to appreciate what you did for me. I think a big reason why I got pulled up was because of you. And so it's really rewarding to know that you've helped them out, and if any of them do really well, you sort of help the business out too. And I think a lot of the sport end of sports entertainment was getting lost. I'd like to think that I sort of at least brought some of it back for them.
Overall, and obviously there's small things that you change in the system, but do you think that the system is run properly?
The developmental system?
Yeah.
I think it's run about as best as it can be. Obviously it's not perfect. I think the biggest thing that's lacking is, I think you need to practice less and get experience more, but it's hard to get the live events and draw them. It's one of those things where there's no substitute for experience in front of a live crowd, and unfortunately the majority of their house shows don't have a large crowd. But I think, it's the best system you can do right now. I don't know how Deep South is in Atlanta, but I know, OVW, it's like Danny is great. He treated me great, and he runs a really good place. And morale is good. And I think now that Paul's there in particular, I think Paul's like the greatest motivator, and I think people are fresh and hungry and willing to do whatever. And I think if WWE will use Paul's ideas, so I think that's the one thing that screws up a lot of guys. And I think part of it was because Jimmy was so cross purposes with WWE style, is Jimmy would see this guy and, you're going to be a babyface and you're going to wrestle this style as a babyface, and then they get called up and they have to wrestle a completely different style or a completely different character. If they can let Paul find that silver lining in each guy down there and say, this is what's going to click with this guy, and then they take him and use him as that, then I think the system would be pretty close to right on the money. Because unfortunately a lot of guys, it's like, say Nick Dinsmore, for example, was working as, a hard-hitting, tough-nosed babyface in OVW, and getting that character established and getting comfortable with it, and then all of a sudden he's got to go up and do something completely different. Or you'll have somebody working strictly in a tag team for 4 years in OVW, and then, we're going to put you in a single, here you go. And I think if the one improvement they could make is if they can try to get, and I think part of it is because they jump the gun on so much. It's like if they get we're going to do this Arab gimmick with Mark Magnus. Okay, let them start doing the Arab gimmick for 6 months in OVW, so we can get comfortable with it and be good at it. But I guess they want to save the surprise, and they don't want to tip their hat by having it happen in OVW, and you're throwing guys into stuff that they haven't had a chance to be comfortable with. Because I think at every point in time in someone's career, if you watch them, you can tell when they really come into their own. It was ECW for me, was when I came into my own, and it's like, then you let me be you. And I think it's one of the criticisms Steve's always had. You over-script these guys, you make them, do something that's not them. You got to let these guys be themselves.
Steve Austin?
Austin, yeah. It was one of his big critiques. It's like, you can't just give a guy a promo and say, by the way, you're now a barber that's angry and happy. You know what I mean? You have to let him find something inside himself. And that's what the whole Austin 316 was. He wasn't the ringmaster. Steve is Steve. He's a beer-drinking redneck in jean shorts. And people knew it was real, and that's why, that he's really talented, but, you know what I mean? If you had made him something else, it just wouldn't be him. And I think that's the one thing that's lacking is, okay, we've got an idea for you. You're going to be this. Get on TV and do it. And the guys don't have enough transition time to find their own version of that. I think if they could have the idea and let Paul mold them a little bit with it in OVW and then bring them up. You know what I mean? It's back when they used to steal guys from WCW, they would still do a variation of what they did before. You know what I mean? It's like Sting became Sting and became comfortable with Sting. If you jumped to WWE, he was still going to be Sting. And he was just, going to do what he had found himself in. Not, by the way, you're now going to be a dentist. And I think that's the one thing lacking in this system. But I think the developmental system's pretty good.
Cool. What led to you leaving the developmental system?
Again, it was just a balance of money and road schedule. They had been harping on me to move. They wanted me full-time. And they had finally agreed. They had convinced Al to move to Louisville full-time and Bill DeMott to move to Atlanta full-time. So basically, before they had negotiated with them, I said, will you move full-time? And I said, absolutely not. So they decided, okay, well, we'll have you float back and forth. You can do both Louisville and Atlanta. That way everybody will get to see your end of it, things, and we'll have you train with everybody. We're really happy with what you do. But, we need to cut your money because, our full-time guys have agreed to do it for less than you're getting paid. And how can we pay the part-time guy as much as the full-time guys? I think it was one of those things that when we originally fought over money, they wanted me to get, and didn't want to pay me what they had to, but they had no other options. And now they had found another option, so they figured, they could hardball me now and get me to work for less. And I've always been, sacrifice versus reward. My family's really important, and it got to the point where, I'm going to have the same busy road schedule, I'm going to make less money, and I decided, we were negotiating, and finally I said to Johnny, I was like, let's just not negotiate anymore. When my contract expired, I'm done. It's not worth the money you're paying me for me to be away from home this long. And he said, okay, fine. He says, if you ever change your mind, the door's always here. If you want to work, 1 week a month, 1 day a month, whatever, he says, we'll pay you accordingly, obviously. If you're only going to work a day a month, you're not going to get paid much. He says, the door's always open. We liked what you did. And I said, thank you very much. I appreciate the time I had here, but I'm going to go try to do my own thing and get the hell off the road. Because even my wife said that even if they had offered me the money that I originally wanted, she says, only 1 more year. She says, after that, I can't handle anymore. You've been on the road too long. You've been away too long. 1 more year I can tough out, but other than that, that's got to be it. So it's okay.
Then what made you decide to open a wrestling school?
It was something that has always been in the back of my mind. Like after I did the Heart Camp back in '90, it's like I helped train their camp the 2 years after that. And then the fact that I was doing it in OVW and really enjoying it, Danny had actually pushed me with the idea, if you ever wanted to get a developmental system of your own, he says, it'd probably be a good gig for you. Maybe even starting something on your own would be sort of the opening of the door you needed. Because I actually talked to Vince and Johnny about a developmental system in Canada that, was on the table but never actually seriously pushed out too far. And so I sort of realized that, I enjoy doing this, and like my wife said, she says, you might be able to get enough interest in doing this yourself that you could end up making as much money and not be on the road at all. And the way things are looking, I don't think I'll make as much money as I would have if I stayed with the office, but I'm probably going to be close. And I'm home every night, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah. So the whole school thing's working out for you right now?
Yeah, and I think it'll continue to grow, because I think it's one of those things where, as word gets out, because I honestly think I've got one of the more professional places. It's like I actually have, a lease on a proper building that's set up and clean and nice with a brand new ring, and, I've got a lot of stuff, and it's a really impressive looking facility. And I think I'm teaching guys stuff that's getting lost, you know what I mean? It's like so many times it's like guys who, I don't think are even having good matches are out teaching people, and they're just teaching them bad habits. And you see guys that don't even do headlocks properly, and it's like, it's a part of the business that's dying. And I think as it goes more, and as I get, hopefully train some guys that are decent and get picked up, and if I actually get some guys that are decent enough that I can, pass word on to Dreamer or Johnny and get them developmentals, people will realize that not only will you learn properly, but, I do have a connection if you're any good. And, I had a small class my first one, but, I think 3 out of the 5 ended up being, capable to actually go out and get booked and have good matches, which is actually a pretty good rate. I think I've got 11 or 12 people from my January class, and hopefully it'll continue to go. If it doesn't, then so be it. I'm at the point now where, I've been smart enough with my money that I'm never going to starve to death and die. You know what I mean? So if it does great, fantastic. If it does okay, then so be it. But I think it's as good a place to train as anywhere. Maybe even better than a lot of places. Obviously, my opinion's biased, but you know what I mean? I think you're going to learn a lot more.
Now, Chris Jericho is a guy you obviously started with, as we talked about, getting your last match against him. How, if at all, has he changed over the years with all the success that he's had?
He's got worse hair. No. He really hasn't, you know what I mean? He was a really cool guy that was cheesy as hell when I first met him. And he's still a really cool guy that's cheesy as hell now that I've, 15 years later. It's like he's really down to earth and really a solid guy. He's one of those guys that, I would trust with my life, literally. He's one of those guys that he's, always been there anytime I've asked, and he's always kept in touch, and he's never had a big head. And, it's like I call him every so often, and he returns my calls and calls me back. And it's like we've had a good friendship. We're very different people. It's like I don't think we'll as good of friends and tight we were in the business, it's one of those things where we didn't have a whole lot in common outside of the business, because he's, big into music and other things, and I'm not. So it's like, I don't think we'll ever, vacation together or party together or anything like that, but I think we'll keep in touch probably till the end, and always, be friends and be fond of each other. And he's, he didn't get a big head, even though he's, was the top guy in the business at one point in time, as the undisputed world champ, and he's, made crap loads of money, and he's very successful, but he's still the same guy that drove a 76 Volare piece of junk car that drove me to my first bookings, you know what I mean? He's still the same guy.
And something else, just going over some things that I glossed over. You worked Terry Funk and lost the U.S. title to him on a house show in Amarillo, which was never acknowledged on TV. What was your memory of all that?
It was great, because I've always been a big fan of Terry. I've just always liked him personally, as well as, respected him for what he did in his career and stuff. And so I always loved the guy and wanted to work with him anyway. And then I found out we were working house shows in Texas with him when I was doing the U.S. title run. And I'm like, this is going to be amazing. Because it's like, as much as Americans hate me for hating America, it's like Texans will hate me 10 times worse for hating Texas. And the fact that it was in his hometown, I'm like, this is going to be great. The heat's going to be amazing. And Terry did all the local press, so it was actually a really good draw. The place was packed because he did all the local press promoting it. And we got to the arena, and I don't remember who the agent was, but he pulled us aside, Terry and I said, well, if this is what the office wants to do, if it's okay with you guys. I think part of it was because, Terry's, definitely got legitimate legend status, so just jobbing out to me was probably a touchy subject too. So, if it's okay with both of you, we'd like to put Terry up tonight and then, return the favor tomorrow night in Laredo. And I think they were more asking Terry, is it okay, we can't put you over both nights, obviously, would this be okay with you? And Terry was thrilled to death. He just assumed, because Terry, I think, is all business too, he just assumed, okay, I'm going to go in and I'll get paid, but I'm going to have to, get beat both nights, and so be it. And, I obviously didn't care one way or the other. Actually, I preferred the idea. When they said I could lose to him, I'm like, yes! Because it was one of those things where Fit mentioned to me the one time, he says, in big matches, I prefer to do the job, because he's a good heel. And I agreed with you. You get more crowd reaction if you lose. And so the chance of going in there and getting that unbelievable reaction of, Terry beating me, I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And I think Terry was just honored that he got to win the title one more time, and so he was, thrilled to death with it. So we went out there, and we really had not a whole lot worked out, because it's not Terry's style. We just had the finish worked out, and that was it. And we went out and just, brawled and fought and went through the people and through a table and all over the place and just did whatever. And the crowd reaction was just off the charts. I went out and badmouthed Texas, and they wanted to kill me. And Terry came out to, God bless Texas or whatever it was, and he was just, the hero of all heroes. So it was the absolute perfect scenario for crowd reaction. And when he won, it was a simple finish to it. I think he went for the spinning toe hold. I small packaged him, and he rolled over and small packaged me, 1, 2, 3. And it was just one of those rare moments where the emotion, everything of the crowd was unbelievable. And like the MIA guys who were feuding with me at the time, they ran out and hoisted Terry up on his shoulders. And even all those guys said, he says, this was sort of something special. It wasn't the same as any other show, but there was a genuine emotion there that was just live, it was different. And like even Huey and Chavo and stuff, they thanked me for for them being a part of it, because it was just such a neat energy moment. And then the following night we had a similar match, and it wasn't as hot obviously because it wasn't his hometown, and then it was also the flat finish that I beat him. But it's like losing to Terry and Amarillo was just incredible. It was just great.
Do you think it took away from it, or were you disappointed that they didn't put it over on TV at all?
It was one of those things where it's a little disappointing, because I think it's just a slap in the face to all the fans that were in Amarillo.
Yeah.
I think not acknowledging kind of, screwed them over a little bit. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where if you would have acknowledged it, all those people in Amarillo was like, yeah, I was there. Instead of, oh man, they're not even going to acknowledge it. So I think it hurts a little bit. But it was one of those things where, there was no angle with Terry and I, and there was no future to it. So acknowledging it didn't accomplish anything other than justifying those, 10,000 or 5,000 fans, whatever it was in Amarillo. But you're still slapping 5,000 or 10,000 fans in the face, which kind of sucks.
How was Jim Duggan to work with when he was part of the Canada thing?
It was fun. He was really tight with Bill DeMott, Hugh Morris at the time. So they were like really good family friends and stuff. So they were always, buddy hanging out. So it's like, it really sort of felt more like, almost along the lines of Jason, in that it was like, Jason was with PJ, it's like Duggan was with Bill. And, it was kind of neat in that, we were doing the whole anti-USA thing, and then turned, Joe America basically against his country. So sort of on a mark standpoint, it was kind of neat. But it was one of those things that it didn't really go anywhere, and I don't know in the long run if it helped me all that much. it gave us another 4 months of an interesting idea. We turned Jim heel and made him a Canadian and stuff, and then he turned back, and it was fun doing it because it was, just turning the Joe American on it and stuff. But it's like we're sort of, from very different schools of pro wrestling and stuff, so it wasn't like it was, upping my work rate in matches or something that would have been rewarding.
Yeah. Looking at a couple of things from Japan, what was it like working for Tenryu?
I loved working for Tenryu. He was one of my best bosses ever. I would say him and Paul were probably the two best guys I ever worked for. That's not really a slight at Vince. It's just with Vince, you're working for a company more so than just one guy. But Tenryu, I think because Tenryu was a foreigner that worked in the States before, so he knew what it was like to be the odd guy out, so he really took care of us extra special. And he showed me a lot of respect too. He was actually the first person to congratulate me on the birth of my first daughter, because she was born when I was in Japan. But it was actually, he started letting me book finishes, which I thought was a huge sign of respect, because it was the point where we were doing the world six-man titles and stuff, where it was, with me with two Japanese guys and then Katao and his guys and stuff. And he actually pulled all six of us aside the one time and said, "Tonight, Lance makes the match. Everybody else, please listen to him." And he's, former grand champion sumo guy, Koji Katao and stuff. And Tenryu was saying, "No, you listen to him tonight. He's making the match." I thought that was pretty cool. And then there was the one night, the second night we worked with Liger and Samurai when we won the IJ tag titles back in Korakuen Hall. So Tenryu was supposed to be the main event against a New Japan guy. It was a half inter-promotion show, half war show. And the guy who was supposed to work got hurt, so they switched it to a tag match with him, and he actually bumped himself down the card and put us in the main event, which I thought was sort of a huge sign of faith that he would be willing to put us on main event over top of himself. And the fact that we went out there and put on a hell of a show and everything else was like, that was probably my favorite match of my entire Japan career, as far as, we main evented in a pretty important show. It was an inter-promotional thing, and then working with Liger was always cool because he was so damn good.
That was going to be my next question. What was Liger and El Samurai like to work with?
Liger was really cool. Fortunately, Jericho worked with him before, so I sort of had an idea what to expect, and I got the impression that Liger's theory was he'd give you as good of a match as you could get yourself, but he wasn't going to make you, because obviously he's good enough to make you. But he really offered very little input the two times we worked with him. He was just like, "Yeah, we're here, and this is the finish. What are you going to do?" And if we could put together a 5-star match and work our asses off, he was there to do it with us. But if we were a bunch of dumbasses who didn't know our stuff, he'd go out there and have a 1-star match with us. And I think it was one of those things where he knew that fans were smart enough that if the match stunk, it wasn't because Liger stunk. And because, for the most part, put the entire match together, and I think he changed one thing. He said, "Oh, yeah, okay." And there was one thing where I wanted him to make a save, and he wouldn't. I think it was sort of the things that, New Japan guys were strong enough they didn't need somebody to help them. But he was totally cool and did everything we wanted, and was really easy to work with. But I think that was his deal, was he's not going to make somebody else's company's foreigner. You know what I mean? So if I could step up and go with him, he'd go. And, he was there for everything. He didn't, there was no back-end politics or anything. It's like he would really go and do it with us, but we had to do it ourselves. And, I thought I worked with him 3 times, and all 3 matches I thought were good. The last one in particular I thought was really good.
What did you think of the ROH show that you were at last night?
Hated it, you suck. No. I really liked it. It had...
You said to me in the middle of the show that it was a lot different than ECW. What?
No, you misunderstood me. It was a lot different than the ECW reunion.
Okay. Oh, okay.
It was very much like ECW in that the crowd reaction and the it felt like it wasn't about just each individual guy. It was about wrestling. You know what I mean? It's like the show was strong. It was a lot of different styles in the show. The crowd respected everybody for doing it, and it had we're moving forward. This is a positive atmosphere. Things are good. And I don't want to badmouth the ECW reunion show that I was at. I was fortunate to be a part of it, but it just felt like...
You're talking about the Shane Douglas show, though.
The November Rain one where I did the run-in on the Just Incredible Jerry Lynn match, which was cool because I love both those guys. But that show really felt like it was a negative atmosphere moving backwards instead of a positive atmosphere moving forwards. And it didn't... It felt like it was trying to relive past glory instead of trying to do something new. And I'm at a point now in my career where I don't have regrets. I'm happy with what happened. I'm happy where I am. And going there felt like, this doesn't really feel the same to me. And it's like, I felt out of place. And the Ring of Honor show felt like a bunch of really hungry guys that were still on the way up and still loved what they were doing enough that they wanted to keep going forward. and the ECW Ring of Rain show, that not the Hardcore Homecoming, can't use ECW, didn't feel like it was moving forward. It felt like it was stuck in the past. And the Ring of Honor show felt like it had a feeling that I could remember when I was pre-WCW, mainstream and TV and whatever you want to call it, still doing it for the love of the sport end of it and enjoying what you did and looking forward to what's next. Instead of going, boy, I wish it was like the way it was. It's like, hey, what's next? It just had a more forward, positive feel to it. And it was one of those things where it sort of gets you that little spark in the back of your head going, man, that'd be cool. And it was I think it was one segment on a TNA show once that I sort of, hey, that would be kind of cool to be a part of. I don't remember what it was. And there was a bit of it last night in your show, with only 2 times since I've hung up my boots that I thought, you know what, it'd be fun to do it again. And it was at the Ring of Honor show last night, and there was one segment on TNA, I don't know if it was when Christian first came out, or it might have been the Christian Monty promo or something, or that, or it could have been something with Joe Daniels and AJ. There was something that on one of the TNA shows that I saw, and it's like, you know what, it'd be cool to be a part of that. And the Ring of Honor show, I had that feeling, and I didn't have that at the other one. It was, you know what, it was fun when it was there, but I don't want to be a part of that anymore. For whatever reason, that's the way I felt at that show, but last night it was sort of a good feeling again.
Now, do you think that Jericho match, a One Night Stand, will be your last match?
I don't know. I never want to say, never say never. It's one of those things that when it happened, I'm like, okay, this is definitely going to be it, if I can avoid it. You know what I mean? There might be the point where, the school doesn't go well and I really do need another paycheck and someone's going to offer me $5,000 for a match. It's going to be hard to say no, especially with the wife at home going, well, we could use the paycheck. So it may happen. I hope I don't have to go that route. I hope if I do it, it's like, you know what, this would be fun. I'd like to do this. So I don't know. It's like it changes day to day. Some days I'm going, you know what, it'd be fun to do something again. If the right creative direction came along, that it could be something that I wanted to do. It'd have to be something that intrigued me creatively. It's like even they've called me and said, if we do another ECW pay-per-view, I hope you'll be a part of it. And it's like, unless it's something that intrigues me creatively, I have no interest. Even if it's a good payday and even if it is, ECW whatever. It comes back to the creative frustration I had the last year or two I had working WWE. It's like, the ECW match with Jericho was on my terms and I was proud of that. And unless it's something that I can be proud of and be intrigued by, I don't want to do it. And if enough comes up creatively that intrigues me, then maybe I'll go, well, maybe I'll get a chance to work with Jericho one other time.
In the final minute or two here, is there anything you'd like to close with, say to the fans?
If the match with Jericho was my last, I hope people don't just remember the, WWE misused you, you were boring, everything else. I think I had a long career that had a lot of good matches in it, and I hope people enjoyed it. And I'm not going to try to convince people that, I drew this amount of money, or I was this over, or I was a better worker than this guy. To me, it's all in the fans' eyes, you know what I mean? And it's like, if you thought I sucked, then go watch somebody else. And if you enjoyed what I did, I'm really glad that you enjoyed it and appreciate your support. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the best thing about wrestling, is you go up and put out whatever kind of story you want, and if people buy it, great. Someone asked me once, there was a guy writing a book on ECW, and he said, what made ECW different? I said, as a wrestler, you're an artist. In WWE and even WCW, you're work for hire. They tell you what painting to paint, and you have to paint it. In ECW, you can paint any picture you wanted. And if somebody wanted to buy it, more power to you. And if somebody didn't, then that was you. You sank or swim on your own merits. And you could paint whatever you wanted. And that was rewarding. And if the chance comes to paint the picture that I want to paint, I might give up that match with Jericho, but I'm not going to do work for hire anymore.